Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today, we're listening to CSI Slay.
It was a typical morning at Sunnyside, Queens. A young woman was getting ready for work. She was about to leave the apartment, and she notices that her roommate Michelle's stuff was still there, which is very odd.
They had similar schedules. So for her roommate not to be up ready to go or have left is very unusual.
I bet if she knew what was on the other side of that door, she never would have opened it.
I got a call that there was a homicide in my command. We had a female who was found dead in her apartment. They were already starting to limit access to the apartment by the time I got there.
We walked in, it was very kept, very neat. Nothing seemed out of order until you got to the bedroom.
I observed dead marks.
Got a big trauma wound here on the left side of the forehead. Also a burn mark what appears to be
And the most disturbing thing
an iron.
was the iron burn. So it was very sadistic.
Well, her hands were bound to the headboard with black cord. The amount of violence that was perpetrated on the victim's body was immense. In my career, I've seen many homicide scenes. This one was probably the most gruesome.
I can imagine the amount of pain that she would have had to go through and endure.
As the police were investigating the crime scene, they realized who the person was.
Looks like we got one of our own.
A member of the NYPD crime lab.
The victim was Michelle Lee, a criminalist in the narcotics laboratory. She was 24 years old. For a member of the NYPD, to lose one of your own is devastating.
Anytime there's an attack against law enforcement officers, it's seen as an attack on all of us.
The NYPD is a big family, and when you lose somebody in the family, there is a heightened effort given to solving this kind of case.
Her colleagues, her friends, the people who care about her, are now the ones that have to piece together her murder.
There's emotions and there's personal attachment, but you still have to remain objective.
Make sure you get the headboard, everything behind it also.
And stay focused on what your task is to try and find out what happened.
They went through the scene with a fine-tooth comb, knowing that the smallest detail could solve this case.
The crime scene unit, they took everything. They took the contents of the garbage can. They took everything that they could that can help them try and uncover who was in that room right before Michelle Lee was murdered.
At this crime scene, there were a few things that really stood out to investigators.
We have a burn mark that appears to be inflicted by something similar to an iron. We have an iron at the scene, so now we have something that's handled by the perpetrator. We have a knife that's left behind that's in the victim, something else that's handled by the perpetrator. Because Michelle was naked, we might have a sexual element involved in this scene.
But the crime scene was devoid of any blood splatter. There was no cast off, and that was very weird. The whole crime scene was puzzling. We needed to discover who did this and ultimately prove it.
The evidence was being sent back to the crime lab. At the New York Post, we knew something major was happening.
The New York Post has a police bureau at police headquarters, and they're monitoring breaking news alerts, they're monitoring the police scanner. They'd heard about a DOA in Sunnyside, Queens, but that's not what the New York Post is going to put on our front page. We needed the real story.
When the reporter arrived, she got details about the age of the victim, the name of the victim, how the body was found. The victim's roommate had been away for the weekend, and she didn't come back until Sunday night.
And she went to bed, and when she woke up is when she realized she had been asleep all night long with her roommate brutally murdered in the room next door to her. As soon as they learned that it was a member of the NYPD and the gruesome nature of the crime, the Post knew that this was going to be a big one.
And meanwhile, at the precinct, as investigators were looking further into the case, they started to consider whether Michelle's job could have been her undoing.
Michelle was a criminalist in the Controlled Substance Analysis section of the NYPD's Forensic Investigations Division. Her job was to analyze large quantities of narcotics.
And as a crime tech, your name is going on very important documents that end up convicting some really messed up people.
Investigators looked at her case files, and it was discovered that she actually did work on big cases involving dangerous, violent drug offenders.
These two guys had a violent past that made this case true. She testified, so let's take this this way.
Was it a criminal defendant who had something against her? Had she testified at trial against somebody that had a vendetta, that wanted revenge?
One of the people that Michelle was involved in convicting could have figured out where she lived through public records.
Somebody who's incarcerated can make a phone call and have a friend or an associate kill someone that they had a grudge against.
The question was, did Michelle pay the ultimate price for just doing her job? Could these drug dealers have gotten to one of our own?
There was no question.
Members of the Runaway Detective Squad all worked tirelessly to solve the murder of Michelle Lee.
Detectives started to consider that her murder was related to her work in the NYPD crime lab.
For their records, fair and files that I'm not here.
Was it a criminal defendant who had something against her? Had she testified at trial against somebody that had a vendetta, that wanted revenge?
Brutality of the man, that's not normal.
It looked like somebody really wanted to make Michelle suffer. But she had burn marks, she had a knife sticking out of her neck. It was clear that she had been tortured.
Leaders of drug organizations commit these types of crimes. It's not enough in those cases to just kill someone. They want to inflict the most violence possible.
Some of these drug organizations have very specific ways of inflicting pain, almost like a calling card. So they needed to take a closer look at her wounds. And something struck police as a bit odd.
One would expect that the ligature would leave markings on her wrist, but no such markings were found.
Which shows that she wasn't tied up while she was still alive.
What investigators had determined about Michelle's wounds is that a lot of them were inflicted after she was dead, which raised red flags because you can't torture somebody after they're gone.
So the whole brutality of this scene where it looked like retaliation against her as being a member of the New York City Police Department, that theory gets thrown out the window. Investigators didn't know if this was like a psychopath, like a sexual deviant. Was it for their own gratification? Or was it to throw off the investigators so we wouldn't be able to understand why and who did this?
All we knew was the cops needed to get this man off the street as soon as possible.
So at that point, investigators needed to speak to the people that were closest to Michelle in life, her family.
We needed to figure out what was going on in Michelle's life at that time. Trying to figure out what the motivation was for this homicide.
Michelle's family is from Korea. She had a big family. They were really close.
We learned that she had lived with her parents, but ultimately she wanted to be more independent, and that's why she moved to Sunnyside. Michelle struggled with wanting to move out because she didn't want to leave her parents. But ultimately she wanted to be independent and she wanted to start her life.
Michelle always dreamed of being a forensic scientist. She was probably a kid who grew up watching CSI, and she wanted to go to John Jay College of Criminal Justice.
She proved talented even in college, and she was hired right after she graduated John Jay.
She had become a member of the Forensic Investigations Division in the NYPD, which is a very big deal.
She got the dream job.
She was an extremely talented scientist. She was one of the true talents in that lab prior to her life being taken. In talking to the family, they had no idea who would do this, why anyone would do this. Their daughter that they loved and cherished was taken from them for no apparent reason and in the most cruel way. And they were devastated. It was hard. It was hard. It was a lot of grief. Well, you can't help but feel for the family, but you have to really focus on what your job is and what you need to do to help them ultimately get justice for what happened to their loved one.
Back at the precinct, investigators began to hone in on the crime scene. The fact that she was found completely nude and tied up on the bed suggested that it could have been related to her love life.
The most intimate partner can hurt you in the most intimate ways. And the person that you least suspect that would do this to you is most often the person who's closest to you.
So, detectives needed to know who she dated, old flings, anybody she had bad relationships with, and luckily there was a key piece of evidence.
Michelle's diary, it was found at the crime scene. A diary was going to tell investigators things that the victim wouldn't tell her friends or her family.
When we went through her diary, the same name kept popping up again and again and again.
Gary. Who's Gary?
I don't know. We don't know that. It was Gary McGurk. It was entry after entry talking about her relationship with Gary.
Investigators learned Michelle met Gary when she was a student at John Jay College for Criminal Justice, and immediately they just hit it off. They just were right. They both were interested in forensics. They had a lot in common. She just fell madly for this very handsome guy. He's a soccer player for the school. He came from Ireland and had this really attractive Irish brogue. It was just this really intense passion. And it looked like this relationship could turn into something very serious. She wrote about her affection for him in her journal. She wrote about how much she loved him, how she wanted to tell him that she loved him and couldn't find the right way to do it. She really wanted to be his girlfriend. But that is when Gary started pulling back.
The problem in relationships in general is that they often don't survive.
He just wasn't ready for that level of commitment. He wasn't ready to settle down. He was this young guy. He was 23 at the time, and he just wasn't in the same place.
Michelle's heartbroken.
According to her journal, it seemed like Michelle was willing to do whatever she could to keep Gary in her life. They kept seeing each other. They had what you would call a friends with benefits relationship.
Michelle really wanted to make Gary hers, and it was clear that there was a lot of passion coming from one side. And whenever there's a lot of passion involved in a relationship and it's unrequited, bad things can happen.
Ultimately, Michelle's fairy tale did not have a happy ending.
When we looked into Shelley's diary, it was entry after entry talking about her relationship with Gary McGurk. We certainly knew from Michelle's own words that she cared very deeply for him.
Seems like they had some kind of vague relationship. See if we can find this guy's sister.
So detectives talked to Gary McGurk on the phone and invited him in.
There you go.
Gary was cooperative with the detectives. He spoke to them willingly.
So we just wanted to ask you a few questions, man.
They asked him about his relationship with Michelle and why they broke up. Gary said that they started dating, but that they just didn't click as a couple.
You're still involved in each other's lives. I still consider you a really good friend. But as the interview progressed, it became clear that Gary McGurk had a very complicated relationship with Michelle Lee. Gary labeled their relationship as one that was taboo or risque. He mentioned acts that they would do. He mentioned strangulation and violence towards each other.
Choking, bondage, things that probably the detectives looked at it as not as ordinary in certain aspects.
It was surprising for the police to hear these details given what they knew about Michelle.
Everything that they have heard about from Michelle is that she's this young woman who's hardworking, college educated, and now they're hearing the different side of her.
Gary was being very upfront. He was disclosing really personal information that wasn't necessarily the most flattering details about Michelle's life. But at the same time, he seemed to genuinely care for her and want the case to get solved. And one of the reasons is because he credited her with having saved his life.
Can you tell us anything else? Actually, yeah. She had been helping me out with some payments.
Gary told police that he had actually had stage 4 cancer, but he didn't have American health insurance, so he had to pay out of pocket for all of his cancer expenses.
It's cancer. Is that weird?
And so Michelle had lent him money to help with the cancer treatment. Gary's totally distraught. He's clearly somebody who knew Michelle pretty well. And he's like, we were so close. And he's a typical grieving friend.
I'm more than happy to help with anything, just so we don't need to bother Trash. There was no evidence that told us that Gary was the one responsible here.
And based on Gary's statements, it didn't appear he had a motive to do this.
What do you know?
So they asked Gary where he was on the night of the 26th, and Gary said he's got a new girlfriend, and he said he was with her on the night that this happened to Michelle.
Yeah.
So we're talking with his girlfriend, and she corroborated that she was with him for that night on the homicide.
Gary said that he even received a phone call from Michelle that night, but he was asleep and didn't pick it up.
As he showed him his phone and said, I got a missed call from her around, 4 o'clock in the morning.
It was a missed call, and that lasted about 20 seconds.
So police asked Gary who else could have done this to her.
And according to Gary, she said that she had somebody over.
And Michelle Lee had another man in the apartment that night. We needed to identify who that person was.
Hey, we appreciate you coming down and thank you for the information. Yeah, of course.
The fact that he described these rough sex acts and then remember what they have at the crime scene, he's actually laying out for them a different scenario where the type of activity that she was involved with could have led to her demise with somebody else.
It definitely looked like a bizarre sexual scene to me. Like a sadistic sex act that had gone bad.
This could have been a consensual tryst that went too far, and the perpetrator tried to cover his tracks. Either that, or whoever did this was just a really twisted, sick, depraved person.
This story, it sounded eerily familiar. Please.
Robert Chambers, described as a handsome, affluent 19-year-old preppy, now faces murder charges. He's accused of strangling 18-year-old Jennifer Levin to death in Central Park Tuesday morning.
The preppy killer in 1986, Robert Chambers, had been involved with the murder of the beautiful Jennifer Levin.
Defense called Levin's character into question by claiming she died accidentally from consensual rough sex.
He had claimed that they were having rough sex and it got out of hand.
I didn't mean to hurt her. I like her very much.
So Robert Chambers said that Jennifer Levin had asked him to choke her, and that's why she died.
So cops decided to retrace Michelle's footsteps from that night, see where she went, see what happened.
Did she have a new man in her life? Did she bring somebody home?
It was discovered that she was visiting parents that day. She went to the drugstore, and she went to the gym, and then we all had an idea.
So detectives decided to search surveillance cameras at the stores and the businesses near Michelle's residence to determine, could they see Michelle? Was she being followed? When was the last time she left her house? Video cameras are a wealth of information.
The NYPD detectives spent the whole weekend just hours and hours looking at that video surveillance. But they did finally see something by that CVS in Sunnyside that caught their attention, something that would ultimately lead to finding the killer. The NYPD detectives spent hours and hours looking at video surveillance, and they did finally see an image that looked like Michelle Lee meeting up with someone on the corner by that CVS in Sunnyside and walking back towards her apartment. The video surveillance footage was not that clear. You couldn't see a face. You saw basically an outline. It looked like a man, but we couldn't tell what they were talking about. The investigators didn't know if this was someone she had just met or someone she had a long-term relationship with.
This was big, so they needed to find out who the person was and talk to him.
Cops looked at guys that she might have encountered at the gym, guys she might have encountered in her neighborhood.
Friends, family, anybody who she had just met or was interested in. They were interviewed and they were asked, where were they? Had they talked to her recently? Were they in her apartment? So everybody was scrutinized.
This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a robbery. This was intentional. Definitely.
But ultimately, their alibis were confirmed, and they were cleared.
Detectives needed something more. With no one behind bars for Michelle's murder, the people who lived in Michelle's Queens neighborhood of Sunnyside were really terrified about this case.
Reporters from the Post went to the neighborhood that Michelle lived in, and the neighbors were totally freaked out. One person told the Post that they were planning on installing bars on their windows, but left the neighborhood extremely shaken up.
No one knew if it was a stranger that scooped her off the street and it did all these terrible things to her.
The community just really wanted answers.
There was a lot of pressure to solve this and get this person off the street.
The New York City detectives were working nonstop.
And the CSI community certainly wasn't taking Michelle's death lightly either.
It was very traumatic to the people that worked at the lab. The NYPD has a long history of dealing with loss. It's tragic every time. It's hard every time.
This marks the 7th NYPD officer
killed in 5 years.
A tragic reminder today of the dangers police officers face every day all around the country. Tragedies like this are not only an affront to the men and women in blue, but to all the people our cops proudly serve.
But civilians that work in a crime lab have no context, have no history, and have no way of dealing with this type of loss. So it's very tragic.
It was a very somber feeling within the whole laboratory. We could feel it. Where the crime scene unit works, where my unit was, you could see a sadness in your interaction with your coworkers and other people in the building.
This is what law enforcement is about. It's about family. It's about brotherhood, sisterhood.
Ultimately, they wanted to do their jobs and get justice for Michelle Lee.
So detectives, they start to think, who else could have done this? This is some other guy in her life, anyone else that might have come across her that would have done this to her.
And that's when police got a big break in the case.
So a few days later, detectives get results back from the forensic testing.
When the garbage in Michelle's bathroom was tested, there was a tissue containing semen.
That piece of evidence, that tissue was the keystone of this investigation.
And what they found totally changed everything.
DNA was found on several tissues in Michelle Lee's garbage can. And those tissues were found on top of receipts that were dated April 25th, the day of Michelle Lee's murder.
And they realized who the person was.
It was Gary McGurk's semen on these tissues. There would be no explanation as to why his DNA would be on those tissues on top of a receipt that was dated April 25th if he had never been in that apartment on the day Michelle Lee was murdered. We had an exact date and time that Gary was there. That was the aha moment of this case. So the totality of all the evidence started to be damning. It was a house of bricks being built.
And at that point, cops pull cell phone records for Gary and for Michelle.
Detective, check this out.
During his statement, Gary McGurk said that he had received a call from Michelle at 4:30.
You know what? I actually got a call from her.
He was insistent that the detective look at his phone.
Just check the phone. He's telling you to clear everything up.
Look, Michelle called me. She called me at 4:30.
He said that he was at home when he received the phone call. But according to the science behind it, there's no way that happens.
The phone records show to us that Gary's phone was pinging off of the closest cell tower in the vicinity of Michelle's apartment. And there's a cell phone tower every other block. So if he was where he said he was, then his phone would have been pinging a long ways away from Michelle's apartment. But it wasn't. It was right there.
That was an indication that the phones were together. And Gary McGurk was trying to throw the investigators off.
Now the detectives know they got it.
And it wasn't a moment too soon.
Cops went to Gary's house in Queens, and they actually catch him leaving the home with a bag and a passport.
When Gary was questioned by the investigators, his story was ever morphing to try and outsmart the next question. So he saw the video surveillance equipment that we had. That's when he told us, "You're going to see me meeting with her when you look at that video surveillance." He was trying to think ahead. And you notice that timeline that he was giving starting to shift. He changed from not being in the area and talking to Michelle to being in the area and being with Michelle.
Finally, cops had this evidence against him, and he told police, okay, yes, this happened, but it was an accident. Michelle was into kinky sex. She liked to be choked. She liked to be tied up. And, things kind of went wrong because she had wanted to do this stuff. So he starts to put the blame on her.
It was the exact same defense plea as Robert Chambers, the man that we had dubbed the preppy killer.
After lengthy deliberation by jurors, concerned prosecutors agreed to let Chambers plead guilty to manslaughter.
The rough sex defense contributed to him getting off with manslaughter charge and a lesser sentence.
If convicted of murder, Chambers faced life in prison. Now he will serve a minimum of 5 years.
This is not the first time that a man had tried to use some kind of kinky sex defense to get out of a murder.
This was an elaborate cover-up, and while Gary lied and kept on lying, the evidence didn't.
It was determined by the medical examiner that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to Michelle's head. And all of the other injuries that were done to her body was post-mortem after she died.
So obviously you're going to be able to tell that it wasn't choking that led to her death. It was a hammer.
Like the saying goes, right? Oh, what a tangled web we weave. And he had spun himself such a web that he couldn't even get out of it.
What we have is a person who's certainly not in his right mind trying to cover up a crime by making it look like it's perpetrated by a person who's not in his right mind.
That didn't stop investigators from getting to the truth.
Tell us what happened.
Including the most disturbing part of his lies.
Already had treated.
They found out that he actually never did have cancer, and he'd been lying all along.
Tell us about your cancer. What you asking? We're New York's own now. They ain't gonna be mad at you. So why would you love about this?
The whole thing was a ruse just to get money out of Michelle.
Gary used the fact that Michelle was a good person against her. He knew how much in love she was with him. And ultimately, that's what led to her death.
This guy's a sick bastard. Totally taking advantage of the girl who really loved him.
On June 16, 2010, Gary pled guilty to the manslaughter of Michelle Lee.
We're happy that an arrest was made in this case. Obviously, it had a very traumatic effect inside the police department.
Gary had a very frail ego. He tried to keep up the story that it was all just an accident. But eventually, the truth came out.
Gary told us during his sentencing that he went into the apartment and they had been intimate.
Perhaps she figured out that Gary was scamming her.
Are you serious?
That he didn't actually have cancer. She's given him all this money for no reason.
Oh my god, you're crazy!
And threatened to report him to the police, which is where she worked.
You have to let out.
Get out. And he just snapped.
Gary said that while she was passed out, he wrapped her head in plastic wrap to contain the crime scene, and he hit her in the head.
He tied her hands and wrists to the bedpost with a cell phone cord, and that he used an iron to make burn marks on her abdomen and chest, and stabbed her in the neck, staged the crime scene to throw investigators off.
And then he took the plastic with him. He took the hammer that he used. He admitted that he took her cell phone. And he admitted to placing the calls after he killed her in an effort to make it look like she was still alive. He admitted all of these things to the judge.
Well, he's a student of forensic psychology, so he probably read somewhere in his books about staged crime scenes, and he thought that he was going to outsmart the detectives.
People like Gary McGurk are narcissistic. They create an image that they want everybody to see, and somebody who sees through that image is a threat to them. Forensics is about finding the truth, and we were able to find the truth in this case.
One of the worst parts about this case is that Gary blamed her, or at least tried to blame her for her own murder.
We don't know if Michelle really liked to be choked or tied up. That was something that Gary created to defame her character when she wasn't alive and able to defend herself. The dead can't speak. He wanted the cops to think that Michelle had brought this upon herself.
And I'm sure the detectives smiled at him and said, well, not today.
Gary really tried to strip Michelle of her dignity, but Michelle's friends and colleagues at the NYPD didn't allow that to happen.
It's a tragedy when you lose a brilliant mind, and there's no telling what her contributions to the criminal justice system could have been.
Michelle is still part of the family, the police family, and we don't forget that kind of stuff.
She will never get married. She will never have a child. She will never have a life. And that's because of what Gary did. She was a bright star that just was extinguished way too early.
Good evening, I'm Anthony Robart. This is Crime Beat, the stories behind some of Canada's most high-profile homicides, told by the reporters who walk the beat every day, and the families demanding answers. We reveal the shocking evidence as it was uncovered by investigators in their quest for justice. Tonight, a Toronto teenager killed at school, the first murder of its kind in the city's history.
They got into the school with the gun. Who let them? Who helped them bring in the gun? Post Jordan, there's a couple of hundred homicides at school each year. So there's something fundamentally wrong in particular communities.
It was some artificial sense of security, a bubble that had finally been burst.
Please don't let my son die in vain.
And now, here's Crime Beat reporter Catherine McDonald with the legacy of Jordan Manners.
May 23rd was a Wednesday. Normally he will say he was leaving. That morning he didn't say anything. He left. That was it.
Jordan is 15 years old and in grade 9. It is his first year at C.W. Jeffries Collegiate Institute.
Was it hard to believe your baby was going off to high school?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Felt like I was getting old. Getting old.
Jordan's mom, Lorraine, says he was into basketball, music, and girls.
So did he like it there? Was he fitting in?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. He was fitting in. Because I visited the school just to make sure that everything was okay. And from what they told me, he was okay. So I wasn't worried about anything.
So the reputation of Jeffries was that it was a really good school.
Yeah.
A safe school.
Yeah.
And versus other schools in the neighborhood that maybe weren't as good.
Yeah.
So you picked that school for those reasons.
Yeah. And I kind of blame myself for standing in there. Maybe if I hadn't listened to him, he might have still been alive.
That Wednesday morning, Jordan heads off to school. It is the last time his mother sees him alive.
Right there.
What did you see?
Nothing. She was feeding me in front of him. I tried to help him.
Was he conscious? You know?
His eyes were open, but he was shaking.
And were you trying to talk to him or give him CPR or what were you doing?
No, I was trying to talk to him. I'm like, Jordan, don't die. I'm like, just stay here. Jordan, help's coming.
Jordan was discovered lying in a school stairwell.
I was putting in an air conditioner in the house with my son and my nephew when we got the call.
Do you remember what they said to you?
The young lady said, Lorraine, Jordan got shot and I said, what? They go, Jordan got shot.
Members of the emergency task force surround C.W. Jeffries High School. Officers are on high alert. They've been told there could be a gunman still roaming around inside.
Dozens of police officers surround C.W. Jeffries. 600 students are locked down.
I have officers on every floor and in every room.
Word begins to spread through the neighborhood that a student has been shot.
They're in the library. They're on the other side of the school.
I was thinking that it could be my son. I'm very worried. I need to see my son.
Lorraine is living a parent's nightmare. She's desperate to see her son.
Nobody knew what hospital he was at. They just took me to Finch Hospital and just left me there, principal. I had to flag down. It was one of the nurses. They found out where he was at, and then I had to flag down the police from 31 Division to take me up to the school.
She was hyperventilating, close to passing out, so I just wanted to help keep her together until she got to the hospital.
From the school, they took me down to Sunnybrook. And we waited and we waited. Didn't get to see him. Didn't identify him.
You never went in that day?
We sat in a boardroom waiting for I don't know what.
Until finally the horrible news. Jordan has died. The first student shot and killed inside a Toronto school.
Coming up, with a gunman on the loose, police must try and piece together Jordan's final moments. 15-year-old Jordan Manners has become the first student shot and killed inside a Toronto school. Now back to Crime Beat's Catherine McDonald with the legacy of Jordan Manners.
One of their classmates has just been shot and killed. The killer, or killers, have fled. lockdown is over, but rumors are now swirling, and students are scared.
I think they were shouting at each other.
Some students will only talk if we promise to hide their identities.
A fight began. People started fighting. Then over the fireworks. Then he went inside school. And yeah, someone got shot.
The people who do know are keeping their mouths shut for their own safety. They don't want to tell people, and then for that reason, they're going to get shot.
There are conflicting stories, but a scenario of what happened is beginning to emerge. Students report hearing the sound of firecrackers go off outside their classroom window. They say they looked out the window and saw a student collapse on the schoolyard and then stumble through the main doors. They say they were told that same student dropped down behind a doorway at the bottom of the stairs near the school pool on the school's main floor. But why Jordan? Was he targeted? Did he know his killer?
I know he was always like happy and like he always was joyful and he wasn't rude, he wasn't anything.
Were you worried about the group?
No, I wasn't worried about nothing with Jordan.
Jordan's older brother Calvin tells me he had always tried to guide his little brother in the right direction.
Don't get yourself in trouble with the law.
So for him to be the victim of a shooting,
It's harsh.
the next day I meet Jordan's mother Lorraine. She's numb and unable to understand why anyone would kill her youngest child.
Jordan was everything that I lived for. Jordan, I love all my kids, but Jordan had something. Jordan had something. He was a great kid. He was great. You know, if he was a bad child, I'd tell you that, but he wasn't. He was a great kid. He was sweet, cute. Everybody loved Jordan. Jordan was Jordan. He was everybody's child. At any one time, if someone would pick him up and they would take him away and they were with him, he was not needed for anything or wanted for anything. He was there.
Jordan's grade school teacher agrees.
Was a good student. You know, I mean, he's like any other teenager that's gonna at times push the boundaries, but just love the kid. The kid was witty. The kid was bright.
Devon Jones taught Jordan in junior high. He remembers how invested Lorraine was in her son's education.
She was a phone call away.
And she had her hands on the pulse of what was going on with Jordan.
Very hands-on. Like I would say, hey, they just spend the morning with me in my classroom, sit in my classroom with Jordan. So like,
because she wanted to keep him out of trouble.
Of course, it wasn't a mother that was removed from this or was an absentee mother. No, she was very much involved.
Devon also thought C.W. Jeffries would be a good fit for Jordan.
Jordan was very creative. He was very artistic. The school, CWI, I mean, it still has a great art program. They figured that out. Jordan would flourish in that environment.
I have something to show you.
Jordan's one true love was art.
My stuff's book. That's what he loved his basketball.
An art book that Lorraine has saved to this day. The police initially appear to have few clues, but Jordan's mother questions their strategy during those early days of the investigation. When did police come and talk to you? When did you find out what was going on? Because I'm sure you're like...
I didn't speak to any police at all.
Until when?
I didn't speak to any police.
Because we spoke to police, I think, that day.
You guys did.
They never came to see you in the hospital?
They were there, but they didn't speak to us. They didn't speak to me. They didn't come to the house to do an investigation to find out anything. No, they did not. No one was listening.
Superintendent Michael Barsky, one of the lead detectives on the case. He was there during those early days of the investigation that Lorraine is describing.
Early on in the investigation, we spoke to a cousin of Jordan, and we spoke to the brother of Jordan. Two were available to us on the scene, which made it far easier for us to access them, obviously. But again, the mother of this young man has questions, wants answers, deserves them. But in retrospect, perhaps one of those early on things should have and could have been a face-to-face with the family. When you don't have answers to provide a family, it's a terrible conversation to be able to be part of, because we want to be able to provide the right, accurate information.
I always hear about the notification of the family, especially as someone who's been doing this now 25 years. I always know we have to be very careful before we go with the name, because we don't want to be the ones to tell the next of kin. Is there now protocols about going to speak with family at their home, like the mother in particular or the father?
And certainly in any case, in homicides in particular, we absolutely do. But you point out a very valid piece to that. You know, positive identification of the individual is paramount as well. You know, we would never want to knock on the wrong door. And so as we're balancing all the moving pieces, the people that want to speak to the police, the crime scene, the clearing of the scene, the managing of all of the outcry from family and friends who wanted answers as to where their loved ones were, all of those things very quickly consumed 6 or 8 hours. In a different scenario, in a different type of investigation, perhaps in the first hour, we could be at the doorstep of family. That wasn't the case here. I won't make any excuses as to why we weren't able to speak with Mom early. Certainly, it's something that we reflect upon and ask that question for the next case.
As police work hard to track down Jordan's killer, friends and family gathered for a candlelight vigil on the front lawn of C.W. Jeffries.
It's just hard for me because, like, someone that I knew closely just disappeared. Like, I can't believe what kind of person would do this.
Hundreds come out to show their support and to join Lorraine, demanding justice.
We don't want anybody else to get hurt, not even the person who created all of this turmoil.
Even Toronto's mayor joins in, speaking out against gun violence.
It's fine for us to say we're not going to put up with it anymore.
It's within these first 12 hours of Jordan being shot that a key witness comes forward to police, pointing the finger at 2 men. Jordan's family urges the suspects to surrender.
I've lost my life, okay? You're out there, okay? And what you got coming to you is going to be worse than what you gave my son. And that ain't no threat.
Then, the break police are hoping.
Witnesses tell Global News the raids began early this morning.
We're inside sleeping. Next thing I know, I just hear the door tearing down. It was just horrible.
Police officers, along with ETF, charged into a home in North York, as well as an apartment inside this nearby building and 2 residences inside this housing complex. When it was over, 2 people were held in custody.
Who are these men? Did they kill Jordan?
Coming up, do police have the right people in custody? Police have raided homes and arrested 2 men in connection to the shooting death of Toronto teen Jordan Manners. We now return to the legacy of Jordan Manners with reporter Catherine McDonald, who, back in 2007, was there on the ground covering this developing story.
At the house where the first suspect was arrested Sunday, Marcia Campbell says police have made a terrible mistake.
I think they have the wrong persons. And I believe the killer is still out there running around.
Media reports at the time described Marcia Campbell as being a friend of the accused, where he had spent the night. She says the accused, who was by Jordan's side when he died, was questioned by police Wednesday night. He even went to the barbecue with the victim's family over the weekend to pay his respects.
They told me that they didn't have evidence on him, so they have evidence now, so that's why they come.
The second accused, who turned himself in last night after police released his photo, calling him armed and dangerous, lives in this high-rise building in the Jane and Finch neighborhood. Those who know him say he has a newborn baby and say he wasn't hiding from police. They arrested 2 young men, right?
Yeah.
Had you told them anything yet at that point?
We kept trying to tell them from what we heard, they weren't listening.
So you had been hearing stuff. What do you think happened?
They said he was shot. That's people telling me that he was in the gym playing basketball, and they called him from the gym to come to the bathroom, and he went, and that's when whatever happened.
So these 2 young men were arrested, and from the beginning you didn't feel they were the right people?
No.
The accused are only teenagers, but not students at the same school. They are charged with the first-degree murder of Jordan Manners.
All I can say is that the family is very upset and shocked by his arrest. We really have no details at this time, and the family is praying for their son, and they send out their condolences to the family of Mr. Manners.
You were able to speak with your son today?
I watch at the courthouse as the mothers of these 2 teens try to avoid the swarm of media following this high-profile case. Minutes earlier, this mother fought back tears as her son and another 17-year-old who can't be identified under the Youth Criminal Justice Act made their first court appearance. Finally, the police are talking. The head of the homicide squad tells us that weapons have been recovered, but a motive is still unknown. Police also thank the witnesses who broke the so-called code of silence by coming forward.
This is one more example of the community getting together, being courageous, and stepping up to the plate, I believe is one of the terms I've heard used or read about in the media. They're doing that.
I just wanted to know why. Why? Why did the hall monitor open that door and let those boys in? What were they doing in the school when they should not have been at the school? They got into the school with the gun. Who left them? Who helped them bring in the gun?
The day before Lorraine is to bury her son, she holds a news conference.
Maybe they'll have to bury me too. I don't know. Gotta be honest, is what I'm feeling. Asking for all your support. Please don't let my son die in vain.
There's a couple of tragedies here. There are now 2 young people that are behind bars. A lot of these issues existed before those 17-year-olds were born. That's being continued. So someone needs to look at the root cause rather than, putting this all behind us next week.
Lorraine is asking for 2 things: an inquest into the circumstances surrounding her son's death, and a provincial youth commissioner to help solve the crisis of gun violence.
Make it right for my nephew, make it right for my sister, make it right for his brother and his sisters, make it right for the community in which they live.
I'm ashamed of myself that it took this happening for me to kick myself and say, wake up. And I'm now going to kick everybody and say, wake up.
As Lorraine fights to ensure that Jordan did not die in vain, she still needs to bury her son. It's a heartbreaking goodbye.
Up next, exposing the truth when it comes to violence in schools, and a controversial move by the school board. Jordan's mother doesn't want her son to have died in vain. It's the first time a student was shot and killed inside a Toronto school. She's demanding an inquest into his murder and a hard look at the issue of gun violence. Now back to Catherine McDonald with the legacy
of Jordan Andrews.
As investigators prepare for the trial, the school board hires human rights lawyer Julian Faulkner to lead a school safety review in connection to Jordan's death.
I feel terrible for Jordan's family and what they had to go through. But it gets broader and bigger. This notion that somehow the schools were sort of hermetically protected against the violence outside the walls was, of course, folly. It was some artificial sense of security, a bubble that had finally been burst. It was burst in 2007 when that 15-year-old lay on the floor.
Global news sources say a code of silence exists among top brass of the Toronto District School Board, a don't tell policy when it comes to reporting school violence aimed at protecting administrators.
It was fascinating, the level of resistance. And what that told you, of course, is that the keep a lid on it mentality was operating full force, and that people were extremely reticent to tell the truth. The resistance reached the stage where literally we were no longer funded.
But you continued on because you wanted to get the truth.
We finished our report. The report speaks for itself.
A hug and a whispered "I'm sorry" from the report's author, the only person Lorraine Small says has told her the truth.
These are problems that find themselves in different parts of the city. Black, white, purple, different colors.
When our panel discovered guns in different parts, different schools, away from vulnerable communities, discovering school violence away from vulnerable communities. That was information we weren't supposed to uncover. But what I also saw was that people had enough, and issues around what was then called the Safe School Culture. This Safe Schools Act that was a product of the Conservative government of the 90s, still operated as a specter over the system. And by that I mean the suspension of kids in droves, literally using this notion of discipline through suspension and kicking them out of a system in order to try to make them better was a philosophy that had embittered countless groups of marginalized parents, community members. And so, not surprisingly, our schools are a microcosm of the rest of society, and you could see the division in the system. You could see the haves and the have-nots. We literally walked into a school where we discovered that a sexual assault of a young, racialized youth had taken place, a serious sexual assault that had been covered up by school officials. So that you had this two solitudes. You had two solitudes of the students set up for success and the students set up for failure, and those two solitudes expanded outwards.
There will be change as a result of your son.
And in front of everyone here, have your promise for that?
I have promised for that in front of everyone here.
One of these changes is putting police officers in some Toronto schools. They're called School Resource Officers, or SROs. Jordan's mom strongly supports this move.
Having the police in there, I figure maybe this might help it not happen again. A child might feel the way and could go and talk to the police, and knowing that the police is there, they feel more safe.
And these resource officers, I remember talking when they were being done away with, the students saying, like, Officer Smith,
some of them
he was like my dad.
Yeah, some of them made relationships with them.
So what was I know you made all these recommendations. In the end, they brought about the SROs. Was that something you had recommended?
No. There are different trust levels in police. For some, a police officer in the hallways, it enhances a feeling of safety and well-being. And if the officer does good work, you don't have to have an officer walking around with weapons to do this properly, right? The officer can be doing good work and be part of a healthy environment in school. The opposite can also be true based on which communities we're talking about. They're policing, parents in vulnerable communities who see police officers and recognize that officer is the one that was in an altercation with their son. So we specifically did not make a recommendation that they be in the schools. We said in our interim report, this is an issue that we're flagging. We think the conversations need to continue with the police services. At the time,
Resource officers were controversial from the start. They were assigned to certain schools that tended to be in poorer neighborhoods with more racialized students.
So what did you think when the whole Black Lives Matter got involved and said this is, profiling here, and in the end they got done away with? And can tell you, Lorraine Small's not happy about it because she felt that was the legacy of her son.
there is no way I can soften the blow for her. There's no words I could use given what she's been through and the loss she's faced. I do not believe that Black Lives Matter determined this issue. I believe the inability of the police, along with school administrators, to adjust to circumstances set this up for failure. You can't just drop uniformed police officers in schools and say, go.
I have no issues with police being in certain schools. But I'll say, however, that cannot be the panacea. That cannot be the solution, right? The school that I'm standing in today, we have a guidance counselor in this building half day a week. Think about that for a second. How about additional people, additional resources?
As the years passed, Lorraine found ways of keeping her son's memory alive. All the while, she waited. In 2010, 3 years after Jordan was shot, the trial finally gets underway. The gun never found. All we know is that Jordan died from a single gunshot wound to the chest. The accused gunmen, only teenagers, pleading not guilty. They are 17 and cannot be identified.
Lorraine, any thoughts before you go in on what you're going to witness today?
The prosecution argues that Jordan was walking with the two accused when a gun was drawn, pointed to his chest, and fired. They allege the motive was robbery of a gold chain, a cell phone, and a wallet. Crown attorneys have witnesses place both of the accused in the school at the time of the shooting. One witness says she saw J.W. drag Jordan down the stairs like a rag doll before robbing him and leaving him to die. And the gym teacher testifies he saw one of the men standing over Jordan, watching as the teen died. But defense lawyers counter with their own version of events, a much different story. They argue the shooting was an accident, that Jordan was fascinated with firearms, that he was looking at a gun in the boys' washroom when it accidentally went off and hit himself in the chest.
They try to make it look like he was in some gang or something.
Do you think Jordan's death had anything to do with the gang?
Jordan was not in any gang.
Or do you think the kids that, or whoever did this was involved with the gang?
I don't know. And all I know is he's dead.
For Jordan's mom, the trial is grueling. Every day listening to graphic details.
Pain and just reliving it all over again. It's like I'm burying my son again.
But not all the facts are shared with the jury.
What the jury didn't hear during this trial is that a small amount of gun residue was found on J.W.'s hands 7 hours after the shooting. It was not admissible because his rights were read at the time. The gun used to kill Jordan Manners was never found.
Then, a stunning turn of events. 2 key witnesses say they lied or enhanced their testimonies.
The way that came out of her on night one, she could win an Academy Award if that was an act.
It's what the lead investigator called a hijacking of the court process. But the Crown says YM only claimed to lie in her statement out of fear of retaliation, leaving the jury to decide whether YM was actually lying or telling the truth.
It's a hung jury. The judge declares a mistrial.
A devastating outcome for a mother who prayed justice would be delivered in her child's murder.
The young accused, who were hoping for acquittals, are also unhappy with the outcome.
How about the city, man? What you guys talking to me for? Both sides of the family are frustrated. We kind of want justice for both sides, whatever that might be.
We're very disappointed. We were expecting an acquittal. We know the jury took 4 days to deliberate, but this matter has taken 3 years to get to trial and 2.5 months of evidence. So we're extremely upset as none of the parties can move on.
I mean, it tells us that this is a very difficult case. It carries a lot of passion. I think that when you're looking at a jury that's been out since Tuesday, it shows that in many respects this jury grappled a lot with medication.
It would be another year before the second trial, and Lorraine forced to do it all over again.
Coming up, Jordan's family prays that this time the jury will be able to make up its mind. But will it be the verdict they're hoping for? For 4 years, Lorraine has been grieving the loss of her son, 15-year-old Jordan Manners. 2 young men, known only as JW and CD, are charged with first-degree murder. Their first trial ended in a mistrial. They now await their fate for a second time. We now return to Crime Beat's Catherine McDonald with the conclusion of the legacy of Jordan Manners.
Whoever did it, they know God's looking at them, and God will judge them when the time is right.
It's not the verdict Jordan's family is hoping for. After 4 years and 2 trials, including a mistrial, a jury finds the 2 men accused of fatally shooting 15-year-old Jordan Manners not guilty of first-degree murder.
We respect the verdict of the jury, and our hearts go out to the Manners family, in particular Jordan's mother.
JW and CD are now free men. To this day, Jordan's shooting remains a mystery. His mother no closer to learning the truth.
2 trials later and still the same results? Nothing.
How did that make you feel that it was reported that people didn't want to come forward?
There was one particular young lady, the one that called me. She knew what happened.
Did she go to police?
No, she didn't. And she's supposed to be a family friend. After having any of it all.
So when you hear police
you're watching, you know who you are. You got kids too. Karma is a very patient lady. She's my friend. She'll come knocking.
Who's that message for?
She knows who she is.
This is the witness who never came forward.
Mm-hmm.
So that must have been very difficult knowing that.
It still is difficult.
Knowing that someone knows and they never went to police.
Mm-hmm.
You think that person could still do the right thing?
After 13 years? This is the last time we, 2017, that everyone signed this after we came back from the cemetery. We were at the creek at Pioneer Village. This is the paper that they use, Pioneer Village days. So there used to be a lot of garter snake coming into the yards and into my neighbor's house and stuff like that. And he was the one that they called to pick up the snakes. He loved the creek. I loved being in the creek, exploring. Loved it.
Jordan's mother has since moved away from the creek and the area around Toronto's Pioneer Village, but the daily reminders are still tough. She often returns to visit the memorial created to honor her son, until one day she gets a surprise.
I'm looking for my son's tree that the school board planted for him, and I'm saying, like, what happened? And I don't see the tree.
It's another betrayal for a mother who is still grieving. Part of the problem is that few staff are left from when Jordan was a student there. As for the plaque,
there was a plaque some time ago, but I don't know why, but that plaque is missing and has been for some time.
The school board maintains the tree was moved about 20 meters during the construction of the playground last summer, but Lorraine Small does not believe the tree she was shown is Jordan's tree.
I don't believe that's the tree.
1 week later, the school board admits that the original tree was in fact removed altogether.
We are here to remember and memorialize Jordan Manners.
Today, a rededication ceremony outside the school where Jordan was an elementary student.
We remember Jordan.
We hurt for what happened to Jordan. Jordan's family presented with a new tree, a new plaque, and a bench to sit on when they come visit. His mother relieved it's been replaced and grateful to Global News.
It would have been basically swept under. The rug.
I'm told there are literally hundreds of memorials like this one across the TDSB. The board says as a result of this mistake, they've now implemented new procedures to ensure this never happens again.
The new system ensures every memorial tree and plaque is logged on the board's site plans and has to be checked by the principal and facility staff regularly.
It never gets easy. People say to move on. It's easy for everyone to say to move on. But I just can't.
Do you see anything being done differently now? Do you think schools are safer now?
I think people are more able to engage over the issues. They're more able to talk about the issues, and I feel proud that we identified the issues. I know that's a weaselly answer, but the idea that quote schools are safer now, that's just pie in the sky. I can't even answer that with a straight face. What is clear is that I think we form part of a very important conversation. And I know that we're still part of that conversation because to my dismay, I still get calls. I think that's a bit sad. I think that a report that is 12 years old shouldn't be that important anymore. Somebody should have taken the work to another level, and we should have been rendered obsolete quite a long time ago.
Post Jordan, there's been a couple of hundred homicides in school shootings. So there's something fundamentally wrong in particular communities. No child is born to shoot guns. I mean, we can say let's get handguns off the streets. I mean, that's a complete misnomer. It's nonsense. Obviously, you have to get handguns off the street, but you have to look at the social conditions that's incubating this phenomenon. You know, it's more complex. It's more dynamic. It's tough, but it's an impending crisis.
So it's funny because we talked about don't let how your son, you didn't want his death to be in vain. In fact, at a news conference, you said that. You said, don't let my son die in vain.
Mm-hmm. He did, because like I said, for a while it worked, and then they took the resource officers out of the school, so
So it's painful that you worked so hard to get these in, to do something, to bring change, and then in the end it all went away. So how do you cope with that? Knowing that this justice has never been served, here we are 13 years later.
Grace of God. He's the one that's been keeping me going. There's a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot of crying. There's a lot of flashbacks, memories. There are people out there in these so-called groups that says, oh, we'll be there for you, we'll check in on you, and none of that happened. None of that happened. So, at the time, it was good for everybody, for the cameras to see what, for them to say this and say that. Who's been here? Who's been here? Catherine. care for me. If I call you, you call me.
How could I not be there for you? You're a lovely woman who I met in the worst possible way. And I now am a mother myself. And even at the time without children, I felt your pain.
Thank you.
And you're the kind of mother I want to be. A loving, supportive mother who has raised a great family.
Oh, I thought I did.
Look at your kids.
Yeah, pain sometimes, but I love them.
How do you remember Jordan today?
What do I remember him today? What would he be like? How many kids he might have been had? Would he still be at home? Or would he be with his sister? I just miss him. Yes. Those nights when you need somebody just to say that one thing, and he was that. Say that one thing and change me.
He really got you, right? He really got his mom.
Yeah, he did. Still do.
How do you feel close to him now? Remember him? Do you ever talk to him? I know you said you go to
All
the
the
grave.
time I do.
What would you do?
All the time I do. I just talk to him. Let him know that I miss him and I love him. And certain noise sometimes we hear and just say, okay, Jordan, you know you're here.
You feel him around you?
Yeah. He's not here in body, but he's in spirit.
To this day, Jordan Manor's shooting remains unsolved, and the problem of gun violence has not gone away. Kids Jordan's age are still being killed by guns. A solution is desperately needed. All the while, Jordan's mother continues to hope that her son did not die in vain. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
For more on this story and other high-profile Canadian cases, check out Crime Beat Podcast. You can listen for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on CuriousCast.ca.
Good evening, I'm Anthony Robart. This is Crime Beat, the stories behind some of Canada's most high-profile homicides, told by the reporters who walk the beat every day. Tonight, families brought together under the most horrible circumstances. Teenage sisters, Marcia and Tamara Audi, a transit worker, called in to cover a colleague shift, and the investigator who helped make the connection. And now, here's Crime Beat reporter Karen Lieberman with If Anything Happens to Me.
Marcia literally ran at 7 months. Not walk, ran. And that should have been a sign to me that she wanted to be an athlete or she could be an athlete. She was so strong.
Marcia was Avis's firstborn. She was laid back, quiet.
She would talk to me one-on-one, not about boys, more about sports and school. And she was very sensitive. I remember when she shared her love for track.
Marcia loved the speed, feeling the breeze against her face. By the time Marcia was a teenager, she joined a track club, and teammates were talking. She was good.
I watched her at York one day, And you know what was funny about that day? Marsha was about to start the relay without her baton. It was hilarious. So, just the nerves kicked in.
Marsha had winning in her blood, a cousin who was an Olympic track star in Jamaica.
And she did receive her scholarship at Arkansas State University. And she was just, days to pursuing that. We were planning to leave for Arkansas State the Friday morning.
It was the summer of 1995. Marsha was 19 years old, fresh out of high school, and ready to get out on her own.
My God, was she excited.
How did she feel about leaving her sister behind?
That was not a problem. Believe you me, there were siblings. I wouldn't say they fought, fist fight, they fought in words. Actually, Tammy was excited. She was saying more space in the house.
Marsha's sister, Tamara, Tammy as everyone called her, was 16 at the time.
Oh my God. Tammy, what a bubbly girl, just full of life. And that's what's painful. Full of, she was so full of love. Tammy was a French immersion student, brilliant, A+. Marsha would have to study for days and days to get her good marks. Tammy, she studied, it came a lot easier. She was an A+ student. And she loved her sports. She loved her bag of chips. As she got older, she would crumble her bag of chips so small so she could last her longer. She loved Marsha so much. We were looking forward to going down to watch this. Can't even imagine being in the stand and seeing Marsha run,
You were so proud of her.
Oh my God, I was. And that's something that bothered me because that I didn't pick up the clues. Because when I would meet a colleague and I would share that Marsha had won this $80,000 American scholarship to Arkansas State, after I went back to the car, Marsha would say, "Why are you telling this to the world?" And I didn't understand at that time. She just did not want the word to get out to the ex that she was leaving because he wanted her in Toronto.
So it was August.
August 16th.
And you were at work?
I was at work.
Can you bring me back to that day?
I was at work and I tried to call Marsha that day. There was a heavy, deep beep when I called home. And I just said, wow, Marsha is on the phone and she has somebody else on hold. That's what I thought. And I called her a second time and a third time. Nothing. I just thought. So I went home, took the bus home, but I'm thinking it's still summer. It's light out. It's hot. I'm going to go home and do a load of laundry. I'm actually rehearsing my evening. Oh, what a mistake. And I got home happy, just happy. I get to the pathway. I can see my house. The door, as I got closer, the door was slightly ajar. And that's not unusual because when we see each other near the home, we would open the door, courtesy. I pushed the door open and something alarmed me. And my furniture in my living room was all moved around, things in disarray. And so I just sort of looked around and I ran upstairs. I ran into my bedroom and my underwear drawers pulled out, underwear thrown on top. And the first thing I began thinking was, someone tried to rob me. I was on my way downstairs to the basement, and I hadn't passed the first landing. I could see Marsha downstairs, and I just stopped short right there. I couldn't go down. I couldn't move. I was just frozen.
When you froze and you saw Marsha, did you know Tammy was down there?
one of the girls had left to go to work, and shortly thereafter, witnesses saw her coming back to the door, and she was with a young black man who was described at the time as about 19 years old, sort of 5'7", 145 pounds, and that was the last anybody had heard or seen from the girls until Avis got home late that afternoon. They both had their throats slashed, and they had been stabbed multiple times. That was probably the highest profile case in the city of Toronto.
Dave Perry was a homicide detective at the time. He still has the newspaper clippings all these years later.
Initially, they thought that just because of the amount of violence and the amount of control that would have been necessary to hold the two girls and to do what actually happened to the two girls, that there was probably more than one person. The other thing that was obvious is that there was no signs of forced entry, although there was what we described as a staged crime scene. Whoever had committed this crime had tried to stage the crime scene to make it look like it was a break and enter, a robbery gone bad, which again gives you an indication that it's probably somebody that's well known to the family or to the two girls. And in one of the girls, in her instance, she'd been stabbed so many times right through the heart. So again, a crime of passion, somebody that's very angry. That was a theory right from the beginning.
Do you remember learning that Tammy was there too? I asked a neighbor to go down to see if he could help Marsha. Give her CPR. She needs help. Something isn't right. When my neighbor returned, he said to me, there are two of them down there. And it was only after I met with the homicide detectives and they asked their questions. They didn't show their hand. They would say, what was Tammy wearing today? What was Marsha wearing when you saw her? What was Tammy wearing? Give a picture of Tammy. It was so unbelievable. That's how I found out. And from there, my life changed totally.
Coming up, a memory suddenly returns to Avis. Something Marsha told her shortly before her death. Tonight, Avis Audie is devastated after the discovery of her two teenage daughters, Marsha and Tammy, stabbed to death in her own basement. Now, she grapples with a startling realization. Had Marsha been trying to warn her? We return to Karen Lieberman with If Anything Happens to Me.
One day, actually, Marsha was packing, so it had to be 2 weeks the most before she passed. I was at her room door, and I just looked in. We were on the same floor, and she looked at me right eye to eye, and she said, if anything should happen to me, it's Rowan. And I just looked at her. And in that split second following, something distracted us. Could have been a phone ringing, could have been someone at the door. And the only time I remembered what she had said to me was when I saw her in my basement dead.
The memory came back to Avis when she met with Detective Mark Mendelson. He was one of the lead investigators initially assigned to the case.
History still tells us that the majority of people that are murdered knew their killers, and that's the premise where we're starting from. So we're starting from their friends, getting information from their friends, from their boyfriends, from their ex-boyfriends.
He had one Christmas dinner at my dining room table. This is a person I've driven home when he was at my house too late, in the earliest stages of the friendship. But I was naive. As I said, he was so sweet. He would come in the door, "Hi, Miss Audie, how are you?" Just a soft, sweet smile. But under that, dangerous.
Marsha met Rohan Ranger around grade 7 at an after-school program. They were the same age and wound up going to high school together. Their friendship soon turned into something more. They were dating until Marsha broke it off just 9 months before her death.
I stated once that once Marcia met Rohan, she was dead. I believe that she could not escape. For whatever reason, he latched onto her. She could not escape. And in all fairness, I believe she loved him too.
He was that jilted ex-boyfriend, jealous, was known to carry a firearm, was known to carry a machete, had threatened friends of hers at school. So as she was heading out for her scholarship, that was the deep secret she was trying to keep. She wanted to get out of Toronto before Rohan Ranger found out that she was leaving.
So why wasn't he arrested?
He had a completely destroyed alibi, but there was no forensic evidence whatsoever to link him to the crime scene, which is pretty incredible.
We have a suspect in mind, and we're certainly focusing our direction towards that person. Someone took the time and made the effort to make themselves aware of the comings and goings of the people in the house. So yes, planning was certainly an element of this homicide.
Is it my understanding that Rohan came to the funeral?
I did not see him, but I heard the officer said he was there. He was one of the last to enter the funeral, the church, because they were watching. They were on the surveillance. I was out of my house for like 6 weeks, so it took me a long time to think straight.
And so that was August, September, October. Now in October, there's a murder. Are you sort of aware that there's this headline that this TTC collector had been murdered? Totally aware.
Another murder, yes. That day I'll certainly never forget. It was October 23rd, 1995.
Up next, another brutal stabbing rocks the city. But what will it take for investigators to connect the dots? Before Marcia and Tamiati were murdered, Marcia warned their mother about an ex-boyfriend. So far, police haven't come up with any evidence linking him to the crime. But the murder of a Toronto transit worker is about to provide a critical clue. Now back to Karen Lieberman with If Anything Happens to Me.
Security camera video shows a bound Demetria Trajeski being led back into the transit kiosk at knife point.
Demetria Jimmy Tracheski was a 54-year-old ticket booth collector working the night shift.
He had closed up the kiosk at the Victoria Park subway station. I believe he was on his way home. The suspect approached him. He was brought back into the station, and at that time the robbery proceeded. It was sometime during the robbery or thereafter that he met with his death.
I got the call as usual back in those days about 3:30 in the morning, and it was my partner Chris, and he told me I had to get ready quick and get to the Victoria Park subway station, that there had been a TTC collector murdered.
It all happened at 2:30 this morning at the Victoria Park subway station in Scarborough. Trajeski was found by another employee. He was rushed to hospital, but was pronounced dead on arrival.
When we got there, we knew that Jimmy had just closed up for the night, so he'd left his booth. All of that was on video. He'd locked up and left in his normal way. His car was the only car in the parking lot at the time. And shortly after Mr. Trajeski had left, the next thing we see on video is he's being brought back into the subway station, back to his booth. It appears that he's got his hands bound behind his back. And the person that is with him, if you can see it very clearly on the video, he's holding a large knife at his back, and he's, restraining him and taking him. Mr. Trajeski is being completely cooperative and compliant. He's not resisting in any way, which, as I come to learn, that was his nature. He was just this sweet, wonderful person that just went to work and cared for his family.
He's just such a gentleman, such a caring man, and I can't believe that he had to die that way. It's so unfair.
He always wanted to make people laugh, so he was always making cracking jokes. They were really cheesy, but everyone laughed. He was just very well liked.
Mariana was just a teenager when her father was killed.
That's just the kind of guy he was. He cared about everyone. Literally would take the shirt off his back to give it to you.
Mariana's parents had immigrated to Canada from Macedonia. He'd come to Toronto with nothing.
He felt so blessed and fortunate. Like, he came here to work hard and to make a good life for his wife and his children, and that's exactly what he did for us. And I know it was very hard. And then eventually he came across the TPC, and I think it was 27 years that he was there. He loved it.
He always had a smile on his face. When things were going bad for him, he kept everybody happy around him. So he's a truly valued employee of the TPC. There's going to be a lot of suffering because of this death. I was over with the family earlier this morning. And saw the suffering that they're going through. It's shocked all of us at the TPC.
Mariana remembers getting the news like it was yesterday.
My mom woke me up around 6. It was a school day. It was a Monday morning. And I thought it was a little bit early. I thought it was strange. Like, why are my mom and brother standing there at the foot of my bed? And my mom was like, she started to say, Daddy's in the hospital. She didn't know what to say to me. I was like, oh, he's in the hospital. Oh, my God. Okay, let me get dressed. Let's go see him. Let's go see him. And I hear my brother going, Mom, just tell her. Mom, just tell her. I'm like, tell me what? It's been a really long time since I thought about this. Just tell her. She's like, Daddy's dead. Daddy died. What do you mean he died? I ran to the washroom and I threw up.
Jimmy wasn't supposed to be working that night. He was filling in for someone.
Wrong place, wrong time. My father was not the intended target. What makes you say why? Has to be pure evil.
That question of why was also bothering Dave Perry and his team.
And there's no audio, but you can see that Mr. Krzyzewski is trying to give him an indication that there's the vault. And he's also trying to give him an indication that he can't open the vault. He only has one key. That TPC security has to come along with a second key, and together they can open the vault. So what you have now is a very frustrated person. This is clearly a robbery. And just after a brief time in there, the suspect was seen running out of the booth. And, if you were watching that video at that moment, you would think, thank God this is over, and thank God that Mr. Krzyzewski is going to be okay. And Mr. Krzyzewski comes walking out of the booth, and his hands are still bound behind his back. And he's clearly, you can see a little bit of relief on his face. But then just as quickly as you saw that relief, you saw this look of horror on his face. And the suspect came back with that knife and began stabbing Mr. Krzyzewski. And you see the two of them fall off the video. And that's where Mr. Krzyzewski was found. What had happened is, as we did the timelines of this, is when the booth is first opened, there was a silent alarm that went off. And 30 seconds after the silent alarm, it goes audible. And that timing worked precisely with just as the suspect was leaving, that the alarm went audible. And it was our belief at the time that perhaps he thought that Mr. Krzyzewski had triggered an alarm and got angry and went back and did what he did. And it was a horrible, violent murder with a man who had his hands behind his back tied and completely defenseless. First murder of a non-duty TPC employee. It became the next and the newest high-profile case in Toronto. And I think as the days and weeks unfolded, it started to perhaps overshadow the Audi investigation, which again was the previous high-profile case, and that's just the way it goes. And Chris Wilson and I were in charge of the case and started trying to put things together as quickly as we could.
It may have felt like investigators were being pulled in two separate directions, but it was only a matter of time before the evidence brought them back together.
Male unknown, unknown complexion, his age is unknown. He's 5'7", slim build. He was last seen wearing a black-colored hooded sweatshirt, dark pants, light-colored gloves, and carrying a brown or dark-colored shoulder bag.
As he left, the suspect left the subway system out through the bus bays. There was a bus driver pulling in for his last run of the night, and he heard the alarm going off, and he was able to give us an immediate description of the suspect. And what this bus driver was able to tell us that was extremely helpful was the direction of travel. The suspect ran out of there and turned left, which is north, and ran full speed. And the bus driver said he's done this before. He never even missed a stride. He jumped onto this wooden hydro box at full flight and over an 8-foot fence, and then took off eastbound along the tracks. The way he described this to us was that they see this from time to time with people that live in the neighborhood. That they trespass, they jump this fence, and they run along, and they'll either turn to the south and go into the neighborhoods, or more importantly, cross the tracks and go north into a whole collection of apartments. The second very important piece of information was that 2 members of the sexual assault squad showed up on scene, and they came over to Chris and I, and they described the fact that they were looking for a male suspect who happened to match the description of our suspect, who was wanted for 2 sexual assaults.
So this one investigation is growing. What point do we start to look at the suspect related to the Audi sisters?
It was quite a while before we linked the 2 cases together. So if you can imagine, there was so much still going on the Audi case that was completely separate. Even from a behavioral component, there was no reason for anybody, including us, to believe that these 2 cases in any way were linked.
Avis Audi, still raw with grief from the loss of her daughters Marcia and Tammy, was also caught off guard.
I can remember vividly when Mark Mendelsohn called me and told me that they had a DNA match for my case, and then shortly after finding out that the reason they got this match, or they were able to find out this person, they were comparing DNAs, and they realized it was the same person responsible for Mr. Chachesky. Marcia had his DNA under her fingernails.
Coming up after the break, how police got their match, and the international manhunt that ensues. Police has suspected Marcia Audi's ex-boyfriend, Rohan Ranger, of murdering her and her sister. Now they have a DNA match with another case, the murder of a Toronto transit worker. And police are about to name a new suspect. Now back to Karen Lieberman with If Anything Happens to Me.
Do not approach this man. Consider him armed and dangerous. Please use a telephone and call us right away.
We're very shocked to learn that the man who killed the Audi sisters is the same man who killed my father. Marcia Audi was a classmate of mine, attended the same school.
And that's when we met Avis. Like, they had told me just before I met her, I was like, oh my God. I just, like, my heart went out to her. But we had this connection. There was this person who had done this to our loved ones. That was a very strong connection.
So the ride that we had on that forensic trip in my entire career is the most exciting and the most complicated forensic piece of evidence I've ever collected in my entire career. And it came out of 40 Teesdale Place.
Teesdale Place, one of the apartments close to Victoria Park Station, in the direction the bus driver says he saw the suspect running.
We had over 10,000 tons of compacted garbage, and we put a search team in there, and we gave them pictures off of the video of the suspect's clothing. We said, let's have a look.
5.5 hours into looking, they got their break.
There was a big sheet of forensic paper laid out of these black pants that we saw in the video, and they've got mud and indications that somebody was running and tripping and sliding, and the black shoes, black socks, and most importantly, that black sweat top was all there.
First, they did a fiber profile on the clothing items.
even the ligatures that were used in the sexual assaults. We found fibers from those ligatures that matched fibers in the hood of that sweat top.
They started running a DNA profile on the sweatshirt.
There was microscopic blood on that sweat top that matched Mr. Trzaski. So now we're excited. Now we know that we're holding on to the clothes of the killer.
They also ran the DNA for the 2 sexual assaults.
Bang, bang, we got 2 hits, and it was absolutely matched.
But there was one more connection to be made, and it almost happened by accident when Dave ran into an investigator working the Audie case.
I asked him how his case was going, and he told me. And he asked me how my case was going, and I told him. And then I said to him, what does Rohan Ranger look like? What's his description? And he said, well, he's male black. He's from Jamaica. He's about 5'7", 5'8", 145 to 150 pounds with a shaved head and a goatee. He says, what does your unknown suspect look like? And I said, that. And we actually stood there looking at each other for a second, and we both went, no. There's these cases aren't linked. And I'd asked Ron at that point, I said, do you guys have DNA? And he said, we just got a DNA profile from under one of the girl's fingernails. So we have all of these crimes come crashing together from one sweat top.
When it came to who murdered the Audie sisters, police realized they could now be certain that they were searching for 2 men, that Rohan Ranger had not acted alone. The mysterious man in the hoodie had been there too.
And now we have to figure out who is that and how is he related in any way to Rohan Ranger? Is he a friend, a colleague, contractor, murder, whatever? We just didn't know.
20-year-old Kincaid is wanted for 3 murders and 2 rapes. He is very bright, has a high IQ, and may even be taunting police.
Adrian Kincaid was identified as the man in the hoodie, the man captured on the TTC surveillance video, the man depicted in the composite sketch created by his rape victims.
He'd been violent with his intimate partners before that too. And actually it was one of his intimate partners that gave us the DNA sample that confirmed that Adrian Kincaid was the person that all of this evidence was going to tie to, because you have to remember you have to have your suspect sample.
And Adrian Kincaid had known Marcia Audie.
Police said Kincaid knew the sisters because he briefly attended their Scarborough High School. One of his cousins was also a student there and dated Marcia Audie for several years.
Kincaid's cousin was Rohan Ranger, Marcia's ex-boyfriend. The manhunt took investigators south to Miami.
Detective Frank Alfonso told us if this fugitive was here in Miami, that they would find him. So yesterday when we came here, he said he was here, and we found him. He kept his word.
Great people, excellent investigators. We were happy to assist them and help them however we could.
Adrian Kincaid was arrested this evening in North Miami, Florida at approximately 6:45 p.m.
Detectives believe Kincaid may have been in Miami since November. Police from Toronto, Miami, and the FBI picked up Canada's most wanted man without incident on an apartment balcony near where he was staying.
That was probably one of the most exhilarating moments in my entire career. I grabbed my cell phone and I called Mariana Trzaski. And all I could say to her is, Mariana, we got him.
Move it back. Move it back. Move it back.
Mr. Kincaid, do you have anything to say? For what?
Adrian Kincaid had a red sweatshirt on. He was cuffed. Dave and Chris were escorting him out of the airport, I think. I have that picture in my mind. That picture's never going to leave my mind.
We feel comforted
to know that he's in custody now and that the people of Scarborough can relax. We know that they were really scared.
Kincaid admitted to murdering Mariana's father, Jimmy Trychesky, and playing a role in the killing of Marcia and Tammy Audie.
We'd arranged for some officers from Peel Region to pick up Kincaid's father, who I'd met and talked to. A very nice man, but convinced that we were framing his son and that his son wasn't capable of these crimes. And he asked Chris and I if he could speak to his son, and we said, yeah, of course. So we allowed him into the interview room with his pastor to speak to his son. They were in there for about, 10 or 15 minutes tops. And he came out and he looked at me and he said, he did it. And I said, yes, sir, I know he did. He goes, no, he killed those two girls. And he killed that TTC collector. I'm assuming he told you. And he said, yeah, he told me everything. And he reached in his pocket and he actually had a micro cassette recorder. And he said, I have it on tape. He recorded his son. So I said to him, what are you going to do with that tape? And he just looked at me and handed it over to me.
Soon after Kincaid's arrest, his cousin Ranger turned up in Jamaica.
Rohan!
Ranger was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the stabbing deaths of Marcia and Tammy Audie.
When the charges were laid, do you feel anything at that point?
Oh my God, it was, maybe I can sleep tonight. Because although I had armed my house, I had trouble sleeping. For a long time, I had trouble sleeping. Trauma like that disturbs your sleep, disturbs your state of mind. I was always looking over my shoulders.
It was such a relief. I immediately thought about Ava Sadi and her daughters. It was a relief for her. It was a relief for us.
Kincaid also pleaded guilty to several charges related to 2 sexual assaults. And he had a message for his victims saying, I'm sorry. Sorry is a gross understatement. Trychesky's family won't be able to hug him again. I'm guilty. Let justice be served. Avis Audie would have to wait until the following year for her turn in court to find out what happened to her daughters.
Coming up, Avis Audie faces her daughter's alleged killers in court. Tonight on Crime Beat, the Trychesky family can take comfort in the fact that their father's killer, Adrian Kincaid, has been found guilty. But the Audie family is still preparing to relive their horror. Adrian Kincaid and his cousin, Rohan Ranger, will now each go to trial for the murders of sisters Marcia and Tamara. We now return to Crime Beat's Karen Lieberman with the conclusion of If Anything Happens to Me.
It was such a long, drawn-out process, dear God.
Rohan Ranger's trial was first, followed by his cousins, Adrian Kincaid. Looking at Ranger in the courtroom, Avis no longer recognized the young man she used to drive home after dinner.
And then I had to take the stand. You know, jury's so close to you, they're looking right at you. The accused are right there looking at you. And for most of the trial, they giggled.
During Rohan Ranger's trial, his cousin Adrian Kincaid testified. He described his version of what happened that fateful night in August, when Marcia and her younger sister Tammy were brutally stabbed to death.
He talked about how Rohan had grabbed Tamara and walked her back to the house, and sort of, I think what they were trying to do is make it look like it was a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. And when obviously she thought her sister maybe forgot something or whatever, she opened the door, and of course that led to the murder of both of them, whereby they were both taken control of. They were taken downstairs. Rohan Ranger murdered Marcia, and while he was attacking Marcia, Tamara tried to flee, and Adrian Kincaid grabbed her and the two of them murdered her at the same time. And that's what netted the DNA profile. The DNA profile that we got that matched all of our crime scenes came from Tamara's fingernail.
She was trying to defend herself.
She was trying to defend herself and defend her sister.
Their bodies were pure, and that's how they were. They didn't smoke, and that they were so decent. And to think that some thug, from wherever he came from, scum of the earth, both of them, they had to just rob us of these.
During the trial, Rohan Ranger never accepted responsibility. He blamed the murders on his cousin, saying that Kincaid had wanted to kill Tammy, and that Marcia simply got in the way. But the jury didn't believe him.
Ranger remained stone-faced as the verdict was read. Guilty of first-degree murder in the death of 19-year-old Marcia Audie. Guilty of manslaughter in the death of 16-year-old Tamara.
And when he was sentenced, he just glared at me. And this look is,
If he couldn't have Marcia, nobody could have her.
Yes, and his words were, if I can't have you, no one else will.
Rohan Ranger was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years for the murders of Marcia and Tamara Audie. Kincaid was convicted of first-degree murder for the two sisters and sentenced to life in prison, the same sentence he received in a previous trial for the murder of Toronto Transit ticket collector Dmitria Tchaikovsky. But the legal saga wasn't over for Avis. Both men appealed their convictions. Kincaid's appeal was rejected, but in 2003, the Ontario Court of Appeal granted Ranger a new trial based on a series of errors made by the trial judge.
Trying to cope and just find it, very painful. It's just being in court again. It seems like just yesterday.
The jury came back again with a guilty verdict. A few years later, Ranger tried again, appealing his murder and manslaughter convictions. He was rejected the following year in 2012.
I've had enough. I've really had enough. And if there's another trial, they'll have to arrest me. I won't be testifying again. All those years, back and forth to court, he is appealing what? I am so just leave me alone.
Along with his cousin, Ranger will be eligible for parole in 2021. So who are you now compared to who you were when the girls were killed?
I'm bold. Bold is off. I've set him free in my mind.
How does forgiveness play a role in that? Is there forgiveness?
It's painful because what people do not realize, with 25 years of them in jail, I was also shackled. I was also in jail. I carried the burden.
One way Avis has found peace is by helping others.
And I'm sure there was some heavy PTSD having to deal with these cases and deal with people like myself who totally was broken and hurting and crying, and I said, how can I help?
Avis started volunteering and then working for the Toronto Police Service. She's most proud of her time with the Employee and Family Assistance Program. Avis also wrote a book about coping with grief.
Sometimes it's maybe to do help with laundry, cook a meal, listen to you, walk with you, walk your dog. So those are those things I captured in the book that, don't tell a person, stop crying.
Just be there.
Yeah.
You know what? It's a crime that impacted so many people. I mean, you have these beautiful girls just starting their lives, right? One with an amazing opportunity on a scholarship down to the U.S. Beautiful parents, lovely family.
You create bonds with people.
You do. I bumped into Mariana many years later walking downtown Toronto. And she came up to me and she said, you remember when you came to our house and told us that you had arrested this guy? And I said, yes. And she said, I told you were coming to my wedding. I said, yeah, that was 17 years ago. She goes, well, I'm getting married next June. So my entire family was invited to the wedding, and of course, the most emotional time during the wedding is when she had to talk about her father.
The police work, I mean, they're my heroes. Dave is like an uncle to me. He's like a second dad almost.
To feel close to her father, Mariana goes to Chester Station, the station he usually worked at, the one where he knew all the regulars by name.
I have a son now, he's 4.5, and we named him James, and his Greek Macedonian name is Dimitri, and yeah, that was after my dad. But his grandfather's not here, so I'm going to see him, his namesake. He used to say to me, when you have a kid, he always knew I was going to have a son. He's like, when you have a son, I'm going to take him to Maple Leaf games. It's like, yes, Dad, I want you to take him to Toronto Maple Leaf games. His favorite thing to do was to watch the games on the television, but he used to love to just walk down to College Station, and we would buy tickets from scalpers because that's the only way he could get tickets, and everyone would laugh at him. Oh, why do you want to go see the Maple Leafs? Ha ha ha! Because they were so fun. But he was a diehard fan, so he would take me to the games, and that's my best memory. Absolutely, I love going to games with him. We should have been there for all that stuff. It's really, really unfair. It's something that we to this day think about every single day in some form or another.
Time moves on, but the loss remains. For Mariana, without a father. For Avis, without her daughters. Their lives deeply impacted by the violent actions of two men.
I wrote on my Facebook page yesterday about Tammy. Tammy had a flag football game. I think it was a final game. And I worked near to where she was playing. And I went to my boss and asked for time off. And I went to surprise her because I love sports. She was only about 14, 15 then. And Tammy saw me from the opposite side of the field. And Tammy, maybe with a wiggle, hey, Grandma, who invited you? And it was only yesterday, profoundly as it is, I said, Tammy, you called me Grandma. I'll never be a grandma.
These families will be forever linked by the horrific and senseless murders of their loved ones. But they were able to find strength from each other, then and now. Their memories now shared and ready to be passed on to future generations. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
For more on this story and other high-profile Canadian cases, check out Crime Beat Podcast. You can listen for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on CuriousCast.ca.
Good evening, I'm Anthony Robart. This is Crime Beat, the stories behind some of Canada's most high-profile homicides, told by the reporters who walk the beat every day. Tonight,
we hugged each other, and she went out the door, and that's the last I saw her.
Lisa was just a missing person, and it's not illegal to be missing.
She just vanished.
Now we have a criminal investigation. Now we have foul play.
crime reporter Nancy Hixt has the story of Lisa Mitchell, the mysterious disappearance of a Calgary mother.
At 29 years old, Lisa Mitchell had a lot on her plate. Lisa and her common-law husband had 2 children. In the fall of 2012, she was juggling 2 jobs to try to make ends meet. One of those jobs took her to the small rural community of Longview, Alberta, about an hour's drive south of Calgary. On weekends, Lisa was a waitress at the Twin Cities Hotel and Saloon. It's the place to go for the charm of a small town cheers, the kind of place where everyone knows your name. That October, the hotel was preparing for a big Halloween bash.
She needed a quick costume, said, I didn't know I had to dress up, Mom. It's a Halloween party at the bar. So it was actually one of my mom's outfits. It was a one-piece jumpsuit, like purple and white sparkles, like a disco thing. So she dressed like that.
Peggy lives in Longview and recommended the part-time job at the saloon to her daughter.
I work part-time at the bar because that's how you get to know people in a small town. Right? You don't want to go there all the time, but yeah, you can serve them and they go home.
On October 27th, 2012, Peggy joined Lisa for the party.
People would comment, like every time Lisa and I walked into the bar, they're like, oh my God, you look so much alike.
It was one of the best nights Peggy ever spent with her daughter.
It was so much fun. Yeah, we were dancing, we were laughing. It made me smile. It was inside feel good to see her out having fun. And we partied after until about 3 in the morning. We got home. And she ended up staying the night here. We were up by about 9 the next morning. And we were just hanging out, having coffee and talking. And it was about 11 o'clock or so. We were going to make a brunch.
But a phone call interrupted their plans. Lisa told her mother she was urgently needed at home. They hugged goodbye and said they'd chat soon. Lisa hopped in her truck and headed north to Calgary. Peggy was blindsided by what happened next.
She just fell.
2 days went by without a single word from Lisa. Peggy started to worry.
I left her voicemails. Yeah, like, hey, where are you? Haven't heard from you. Call me. Right? And then I think I sent her a couple texts. Like, haven't heard. What are you doing? Or is everything okay? So I drove to Al's place and knocked on the door and didn't know what to expect. And he opened the door and I asked him where Lisa was. And he said she took off, she left. He said that they were having a discussion on the Monday, I think he said. She had sent him out to go get cigarettes. And when he came back 15 to 20 minutes later, he said she was gone. The first thing I noticed is I looked to my right and there a front hall closet and I saw her shoes, her favorite shoes, and her jacket. I mean, it's October. Where would she go without her favorite jacket and shoes? And I said, I want to see the rest of the house. And I went through the house and there was a few of her personal things. I didn't see her purse, but I saw a lot of her jewelry that she would normally have on if she left the house. She had a phoenix necklace, a leather wristband type thing. There were certain things that she wore when she left the house, and they were still there. But I didn't see her.
That's when Alan explained that after she left, Lisa sent him an email. He suggested she might have sent Peggy one as well. Maybe that would lead to some answers. So Peggy went home and checked her email.
And there was an email there, just have to get away, we'll be in touch, love you.
Peggy couldn't believe it. She struggled to accept Lisa would just pick up and leave. They emailed back and forth for a few weeks. but there was never enough information in those messages to alleviate Peggy's worries. She slept with her phone beside her bed, but when that call finally came, Peggy missed it. She was asleep.
It was a couple weeks later, the 16th, like at 2:45 in the morning, I got a voicemail. She said, I'm okay. Sometimes things get out of hand. Sometimes things take a while. I can't remember the whole thing. But I'm okay. But the conversation ended where she said, okay, he's home. I gotta go. Who's home? And why do you have to go? So you think in your mind, is she with someone controlling? Is she chained up in a basement somewhere? You know, you've heard of that, right? And is they controlling him? Like, why can't you have a conversation with your mom? Like, who is this person that you're with? But it just didn't sound right.
Coming up after the break, things weren't adding up. Was there foul play, or had she just taken off? Peggy decided she needed to go to police. Lisa's case was now being looked at by Calgary police. She was still considered a missing person. But that didn't make sense to her mother, who knew it wasn't in Lisa's character to just take off. We now return to Nancy Hixt with the disappearance of Lisa Mitchell.
Lisa was the youngest of Peggy's two children. From a very early age, she expressed herself through art.
She started drawing when she was 4. She was a lot into anime with Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z and those types of drawings. Yeah, she could draw a motorcycle from memory in explicit detail.
Lisa also loved music.
In high school, that is when she met her friends they formed a girls singing group and dance. They, make their own videos. They were called Just Cuz, CUZ.
After high school, Lisa worked at a lot of grocery stores and coffee shops, and at one point, she worked for a mobile snow cone company. She would work selling snow cones at different events. That included concerts, which allowed her to meet some of her favorite bands.
Nickelback was playing. So she was done her work, and she was just, working her way to the front like she always does. And she ended up talking to this lady there, and it turned out that it was Chad Kroger's mom. So I've got a picture of her upstage, on stage at the autograph table, sitting behind the table between Chad and the other guy.
Lisa talked about that moment for years. It was not long after that she met Alan Schieback.
She was at a restaurant somewhere in Northeast Calgary, and he was one of the sous chefs or one of the cooks there. My husband at the time and I didn't like him. We didn't think he would be good for her because she was so outgoing and so vivacious, and he was more introvert.
Lisa fell in love with Alan, but as her mom predicted, their differences soon caused a rift in their relationship.
Right from the beginning, he would get upset if, she went out, because like I said, she just wanted to be out there and have fun. And he would get a little bit of, upset, because like I said, he was more of an introvert. But they worked it out, and Lisa said, this is who I am.
Things were better for a while, but eventually the same old issues popped up again.
And I got a call from her. She had come home from work, and he had moved out on her and taken everything. So at that time, I was separated from my husband. So me and my current husband, Jay, said, okay, we're on our way. And we rented a vehicle and went up there. And I asked her at that time, because I know one of the things he had taken was her guitar. And I said, what did he take that meant the most to you? And we'll get that back. And she looked at me and she said, my heart.
After 5 years with Alan, Lisa moved in with her mom. She even started dating again.
During that time she was gone, Pal came. Pal found where I was and said he was sorry about what happened. He wanted her back. He showed me an engagement ring he had bought for her. And I said, you know, she's moved on. She's in Toronto with so-and-so. So, you know, you've got to talk to her, right? And a couple of weeks later when Lisa got back, then, yeah, they got back together.
It wasn't long after that they started a family. First a little boy, then just over 2 years later, they had a girl.
We would talk 3 or 4 times a week. And I remember she said the power was out in their house, so they had to barbecue their meals. And one time something else her oven didn't work, so she made cookies in a frying pan for the kids. Like, it was always for the kids.
Alan worked as a cook, or sometimes as a mechanic. But Peggy said he had trouble keeping jobs. Lisa would take care of the kids during the day, and then go to work at night.
So I would be there during the day, and Al would come home from work, and he'd always be, you know, I'm tired. And meanwhile, she's been looking after the kids all day. She's made supper, and all he wants to do is just sit and veg on the couch. He was always too tired to play with the kids, to help her in the kitchen at that time. And yeah, and then you'd see the yelling start a little bit, because she would just get frustrated because she had to get ready to go to work, and she couldn't do everything.
The relationship took a turn for the worse, and Lisa told Peggy the fights turned violent.
You can tell them your thoughts, and you can try to guide them and support them. Like, she knew at any time that we would take her in, right? Even at one time we said, bring the kids out here and live with us. That was in July 2012. We said, you can live with us, right? That's when I got her the part-time job at the hotel. So it's a start.
After a decade together, Lisa felt obligated to try to work things out with Alan. So that's what they did. They moved into a new place in Southeast Calgary.
I was hoping that they could be better, and because she felt good about herself, she was happy. But at that time too, she was Manel when she was happy. Like, he didn't make her happy. It's probably what it down to.
When Lisa left her mom's house that morning after the Halloween party, Peggy thought everything was fine.
We hugged each other, and she went out the door, and I saw she had parked her truck down the street, and that's the last I saw her.
After the break, the investigation into what happened to Lisa was ramped up as the evidence began to point to foul play. We now return to Nancy Hixt and the disappearance of Lisa Mitchell.
Constable Carl Sudik was working with the Calgary Police Missing Persons Unit when Lisa disappeared. He was assigned as the lead investigator on the case.
Lisa was still out there as far as everybody knew. So we had to kind of follow through and see, okay, where could she be? Who could she be talking with? Why would she want to leave her family? First thing is, just talk to people who are close to her, find out what her movements are, find out where her banking is, try and track her banking. You know, if we could, try and find phone records, just get a feel for where she's supposed to be, who she's supposed to be with, and what her lifestyle was like.
What stood out to Sudik were the emails from Lisa to both Peggy and Alan.
Yeah, it was very confusing. Lisa wasn't sure if she wanted to be there, so she was dating other men at the time, which added another level of complexity trying to find out who she was dating, because some of these people that she was dating and talking with were not in Calgary, which kind of fit the story of her leaving Calgary and going away with someone else that I believe the emails and the voicemail had said.
But every possible lead was a dead end.
There was a cursory search done of the house. The officers took a look through just to see if anything looked out of the ordinary, if there had been signs of any sort of violence. The house, from what I understand from their notes, was clean. It was organized, except the basement. There was just a bunch of junk piled up, which you look at half the basements in Calgary, looks pretty much the same.
It appears Lisa had, in fact, just picked up and left. Investigators needed to find out if Alan had any more information that could help them track down Lisa.
We interviewed Alan just to get him into a story of exactly what happened. I'd asked a senior homicide investigator to sit down and have a chat with him. Someone who's very, very experienced in interviews and can pull the information out that we need to follow through. Because right now, Lisa was just a missing person, and it's not illegal to be missing.
On January 29th, 2013, Alan was interviewed by Calgary Police Homicide Detective Dave Sweet.
Thanks for coming in. I represent Hospital Suitic. You were the last person that we can confirm actually physically saw Lisa.
Lisa's common-law husband opened up to Sweet about their rocky relationship.
A lot of yelling. Sometimes pushing. Can I ask you, were you the abuser or were you the abused? You were the abused. Okay.
He said since then, they had come to an agreement. They were going to put the past behind them and work together for their kids.
Okay, it seemed like progress was being made. Like we both did want the same thing. Now I have to look back at it and go, okay, well, you left. You just up and left.
Their relationship had such an on and off thing for over the 10 years. He looked like he was beat down. He looked like it was one of those things like, okay, she's finally left me, so what do I do?
It seemed police had hit a dead end. Lisa had vanished without a trace. It was right about that time that a change in the law allowed Constable Sudik access to some of Lisa's private information, which could help them track her down. They needed to find Lisa so they could rule out foul play, and a change in the Missing Persons Act in Alberta opened up some new investigative avenues.
At that time, you could get the text records, so we were able to see who she spoke with and what she was speaking about. She had spoken to a lot of people, so we had to go through and talk to every one of those persons to see if they've heard from Lisa, if she was with, or if they were with Lisa at the time. Because she had an online dating profile at the time, she was dating people, so we were talking to people that she had dated. A couple of those people there was minimal information about them, so we didn't know who they were. There was one guy with a very generic name, and the number came back disconnected. So we thought, okay, that's something we can look into because all of a sudden this person's disappeared, and Lisa was having a long-term conversation with him. So we had to find him and interview him.
Officers continued to investigate, but there was still no sign of Lisa. Months turned into years. Alan needed to move on and build a life without her. Alan was working hard to build a happy home for his kids.
Coming up after the break, Lisa's mother needed answers. Police hoped an appeal for help from the public could spark a break in the case. The months turned into years, and still no answers. But police didn't give up. We now return to Nancy Hixt with a seemingly small detail that led to a major break in this case.
A plea for help tonight from the family of a missing Calgary woman. Lisa Mitchell disappeared without a trace.
Nancy Hixt reports.
Mitchell's mother has so many unanswered questions. Questions police have tried to answer, but so far have no good leads.
Sometimes I go to bed at night and I just wonder if she's warm, comfortable, happy, not knowing. not knowing is the worst.
A few weeks after that story aired, police announced a break in the case. On December 6, 2014, more than 2 years after Lisa Mitchell disappeared, police found her body. Lisa Mitchell had been in their home all along. It took investigators an incredible amount of time and resources to be able to uncover the truth. Remember that phone call to Peggy, the one she got when she was asleep? That call turned out to be key evidence in the case.
We were able to get the phone number that had called Lisa. Because I asked Peggy for her phone records, it didn't show up because it was a private number. It was registered with a kind of one of those page-go type phone companies.
The phone was purchased in Calgary, but registered in Edmonton. There were only a handful of calls made, 4 to Alan Schieback and 1 to Peggy Mitchell. On the surface, that sounds about right. After all, Peggy did receive a call.
Except that Alan told us he never heard from Lisa after the emails, which stopped coming on November 4th. Something in Alan's story is not making sense. So as far as we can tell, he's lied to us for some reason. We don't know his involvement. We don't know why. But now we have evidence that there's more to Alan than what we're hearing.
That took the investigation in an entirely new direction. The fact Alan did not disclose the full truth to Detective Sweet changed everything.
Now we have a criminal investigation. Now we have foul play.
Crime analysts are able to map out cell communications. In this case, the cell ping showed where the caller was when that voicemail was left for Peggy in the middle of the night.
It was down the street from Alan's house. So which means that if Lisa left that message for Peggy, she was either in Alan's house or near Alan's house. Now that it's a crime, I could use the full power of the criminal code to request Alan's phone records, find out where he's been for the last few months, get his bank records, find out what he's been spending his money on, do those sorts of things, and investigate to see how was Alan involved and was he really involved.
It turned out Alan had been doing a bit of shopping in the days following Lisa's disappearance.
So the banking records provided us the stores he went shopping and the amount he paid. So from that, I was able to go to each of those stores and request a copy of the receipt for that transaction. He went shopping for a large plastic tub, cat litter, bleach, gloves, cement, a mixing bucket, and a 4 by 2 foot piece of plywood. Well, he didn't have a cat, so the cat litter was kind of a red flag. Peggy had told me that he was deathly allergic to cats. And also there was a cash withdrawal from Walmart, that same transaction for $40. The cell phone used to contact Peggy was a $39.99 cost for a 3-month or a 1-month use that was bought at a Walmart. Those are not normal things that you purchase. I don't purchase, or the normal person would purchase. So I went out and actually purchased those items just so I could see exactly what they were. I went and purchased the same SKU. And I brought them back to my coworkers in missing persons and homicide and said, what do you guys think? And they all said, that's a burial kit.
But police still didn't have the proof they needed to find her body or make an arrest. During this time, Alan Schieback was just going about his normal life. He didn't realize he was a suspect. And while he was at work, investigators took another look around his house.
The house looked like any normal house. He had pictures of him and the children released up on the walls. The computers were mirrored, so I didn't know what was going on with that because it had to be analyzed. And we took a look at the basement, and in the basement was the bucket, the plywood, the bleach, the gloves, and a large built-out cement construction in the corner of the basement that was covered with boxes.
Police were careful not to move anything. They didn't want to tip Schieback off that they were onto him. they still needed more evidence. Investigators needed to come up with a way to get him to confess, and that's when they decided to do an undercover sting dubbed Operation Aurora.
That was the major crimes investigative technique to befriend Alan and find out what happened.
It was a Mr. Big sting, a tactic used in a lot of major crimes investigations. Police sometimes create fake criminal organizations, and the suspects confess to a crime boss or Mr. Big. But that scenario wouldn't work in this case.
Well, that was the troubling part. Alan's not a criminal. He had no criminal past. He wasn't your biker. He wasn't your gangster. He wasn't even your shoplifter. They were able to befriend Alan through non-criminal means. So the undercover guys were very creative in finding ways to get out. We worked on arranging babysitters so we could help him come out and, hang out with the guys.
There was a lot of time and effort put in to making the undercover operation work.
We came up with a scenario where Alan was taken out of town, work with these guys, hang out with them, where we were prepared now to search his house.
Alan Shyback went on a trip to Winnipeg, and that's when police turned up the heat.
You want to make him feel a lot of pressure. So we wait until Alan's with one of our undercover operators, and there's a phone call made where Detective Sweet kind of explains what's happened. Now it's a criminal investigation, and that we're going to be searching his house, and kind of leave it at that.
Alan was in a vehicle with an undercover officer when Detective Sweet told him his house was being searched.
I was told he stopped breathing for a second. He turned white. He started getting clammy, sweaty, began to hyperventilate, and had to have a cigarette. Alan gets out of the truck. The undercover operator gets out of the truck with him. They have a smoke, and Alan actually tells us what happened.
Investigators made an arrest in the case. Alan Shyback was charged with second-degree murder and causing an indignity to Lisa's body. Four and a half years after Lisa disappeared, in April of 2017, Shyback stood trial. Graphic details of the case were revealed in court. It turned out Lisa's body had been hidden in plain sight.
Next on Crime Beat. Dramatic details of the undercover operation would soon come to light. For nearly 2 years, police worked to solve Lisa's case, and what they needed was a confession. To get that, they used a covert police technique, a Mr. Big sting operation. Here now is Nancy Hixt with a conclusion of the disappearance of Lisa Mitchell.
As any major crime, there's somebody who can help him. So the undercover operator knows a guy who Alan's met before, who has talents and abilities, who could possibly help him out in this situation.
Shyback went to an apartment where he met with a man he believed could help him evade arrest.
I just recently got contacted by a homicide detective. I basically have to get and completely lose who I am, who the kids are, and start over. Like they do search the house. The reality is, they are going to arrest me.
Shyback opened up to Mr. Big and told him about the tumultuous relationship.
We realized us fighting separately wasn't getting us anywhere. We tried to reconcile. We've been living together again for a few months, and of course, it was good for a little bit.
He told the officer The day after the Halloween party in Longview, Lisa arrived home and they started arguing.
Yeah, she's just in a bad mood that whole day, and they kind of just go to bed. But next night day, and right from everything, that's in fact how we get through that night. Then she just said the hell of it, went to sleep. I had slept on the couch, and first thing the next day it was just right back into it. It just kind of kept going.
Shyback said the fights continued when they got up the following day.
I don't even remember what the real fight was all about. I don't even remember. All I remember is that we were just arguing. It was just back and forth. Yeah, the whole day, and I can't even think of what it was. I don't know what we were saying to each other. I don't know what was getting everything so heated.
Shyback said they were in the kitchen when things took a turn for the worse. He said Lisa had a chef's knife in her hand.
She kind of came towards me with the knife, and I don't know if she kind of, I think I thought she was trying to stab me. I don't know how. I honestly did. Things happened. I was trying to hold her back, hold her down. My hands went up around her neck. I choked her. I do remember sitting there trying to let go and not get moved. So I wound up hiding her body and reading some text messages and emails from her to family and stuff saying she left.
He decided he had to make Lisa disappear.
I cleaned that place top to bottom with bleach and stuff 2 or 3 times afterwards, just to be sure.
While Shyback was confessing, police were busy searching the house. Constable Sudik needed to find her body, and they needed to do it carefully so they didn't destroy evidence.
So we consulted with UFC archaeologists. How do we excavate? How do we bring it down? Do we spend days? Do we spend weeks? And then ultimately it came down. We start bashing away at cement until we find her, and then make the plan or go with plan A, B, or C. So we cleaned the basement out. The good folks at Homicide were more than happy to come out and help me break the cement away. And with chisels and hammers, we were able to break it down to the point we found a large Rubbermaid container in the cement. And we opened it up, and there was Lisa's remains in cat litter and salt or soft water salt.
Lisa was placed in a plastic tub in the fetal position. She was covered in salt and cat litter, and the tub was duct taped shut. Shyback used a door to create a mold around the plastic tub and then poured cement over top the container, entombing her.
It was cracked. And he used the bleach and cleaner to clean it up from time to time. And he banned the children from going downstairs into the basement.
Police found air fresheners all over the house to try to hide any smell. Shyback tried to cover off every angle that could lead investigators back to him.
So I rolled another cell phone like through Walmart kind of thing, all those prepaid, got activated to an empty number. And that's what I used to call her mom and leave the voice, and I just played a recording from the computer through the phone, through the speaker basically. It said, yeah, hi mom, sorry, I just got kind of way. I'm like, oh, it's coming back now, I gotta go. Because I accessed her email account and stuff in there, and I created the phone call. Just trying to make sure. But I have some clips of her voice. I patched those together and sent her mom a voicemail with her voice on it to try and help make sure that things that she was gone and try to get some sort of life back to her.
Police enlisted the help of an audio specialist from their tech crimes unit and were able to find the calls he used to splice together the voicemail. He had been tracking Lisa's communications for some time, leading up to her disappearance.
He put stalkerware on her phone. So every time something would happen with her phone, the information would go to an email account or a storage area that he had set up. So you can go through and review all that.
A forensic examination of Scheiback's laptop revealed a history of online searches in the weeks and months after Lisa vanished. In December 2012, he Googled how body decomposition is affected by various things such as salt, lye, concrete, lack of air, and lack of insect activity. Similar searches were done in April and May of 2014, along with other queries on murder legislation in Canada. The state of decomposition made it difficult for the forensic pathologist to examine Lisa's body, but determined she died as a result of probable manual strangulation. During the trial, Scheiback testified in his own defense. In every confession he gave, Scheiback maintained he killed Lisa in self-defense.
He said that if he was defending himself against Lisa, again, he was there, Lisa was there, Lisa's now dead.
The court found the act of holding his hands around Lisa's throat, resulting in her death, was not self-defense. However, the judge said she had a reasonable doubt that he intended to kill her. Alan Scheiback was found not guilty of second-degree murder and instead convicted of the lesser offense of manslaughter. He was also convicted of interfering with her remains. In court, Scheiback said he was deeply sorry for what had happened. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison, 5 for manslaughter and 2 for indignity to Lisa's body. But the prosecution wasn't satisfied with that sentence and filed an appeal. Alberta's top court pointed to Scheiback's deception. He led Lisa's family to believe she was alive and hold out hope she might return. The Alberta Court of Appeal found the original sentence was unfit and increased his overall sentence by 3 years. The what-ifs have replayed over and over in Peggy's mind. What if she would have done a more thorough search of Scheiback's home that day when she confronted him? What if she had done some snooping around any one of the times she visited the home and slept over while caring for her grandkids?
But then, okay, if you take that what if and I would have done that, maybe they wouldn't have gotten as good as they did. Yeah. Things happen for a reason sometimes, right? Like one of the officers in the end apologized for saying, didn't truthfully tell me what they were doing because obviously he couldn't. And I had said to him, I said, but you got him. It doesn't matter. It took you 2 years. You got him.
Peggy's life forever changed when her daughter disappeared. Every day she thinks of her. And the day her body was found, Peggy's life took another dramatic turn. She's now raising her 2 grandkids, Lisa's children.
When this all happened, December 5th, they find Lisa. A week later, we buried her. And a week after that, so within 2 weeks, we had kids. Total life changer. I hit my close to retirement age. I'm raising a 10 and a 12-year-old. Yeah. But they bring life back. Just like, I can't take you swimming today. Or, I do have 20 minutes to read a story with you. Or we can have a movie night. It's different. It makes you, well, it's made us take a second look and really enjoy life and sit back. There was one point that her daughter wanted to hear her voice because she was very young. I believe she was 3 when her mom disappeared. And it was a couple years ago. She had said to me, she said, Grandma, I don't remember my mom's voice. It's a hard day. So I said, okay, I've got some VHS tapes. And she's like, we don't use VHS.
And I pulled them out because when Lisa was in the dance troupe with just Cuz and her friends, they made their own videos. We sat here on a Saturday afternoon and we watched all her videos from her dance works and her just Cuz days with her girlfriends. And in these videos, she was singing, she was dancing, she was talking, and it was just amazing. Yeah, we spent a whole afternoon just crying, laughing, and it was really good. It was what she needed.
But along with remembering the good times come questions about where their parents are.
They know at first we were allowed to tell them that their mom's an angel and their dad is with the police. And that's all we were allowed to say for the first few years. But over the last few years, they know that their dad did something to make their mom die, and that is why he's in jail.
The older the kids get, the more questions they ask. And Peggy knows it's only a matter of time before they want to know exactly what happened to their mother.
We do have the hard copies of newspapers and one of the pre-trial transcripts. So we have hard copies for them. But when you bring that up, and her daughter just brought some stuff up in last few days, we were throwing rocks at the river. We went down there for a few hours, and she's just picking them up and chucking them in. And she said, "Grandma, I'm getting rid of some of my anger." I said, "Why do you have that much anger at your young age? You can't carry that." And she goes, "I'm glad my dad's in prison for what he did to my mom." But she didn't go into detail. And I said, "Throw more rocks. Get it out before we go home."
Peggy loves that Lisa's legacy will always live on through her children.
How much of Lisa do you see in them? Oh my God. Every day. And she was very outgoing, very extroverted, loved to have fun, but in a good way. She was an awesome mother. She adored those kids. They were the light of her life. And her kids will carry that on. Her son remembers a few things, but he knows that he remembers having fun and that she made him smile and feel good. I mean, he was young, but she had a spirit that keeps living on in them.
In February 2019, just over 6 years after Lisa's death, and just a few years into his 10-year prison sentence, Shyback was granted day parole. Several months later, sex toys were found in his room at a halfway house, and he admitted he had paid for sex at a massage parlor on more than one occasion. The parole board found he was deceitful and revoked his day parole. Shyback was sent back to prison. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
For more on this story and other high-profile Canadian cases, check out Crime Beat Podcast. You can listen for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on CuriousCast.ca.
Good evening, I'm Anthony Robart. This is Crime Beat, the stories behind some of Canada's most high-profile homicides, told by the reporters who walk the beat every day.
Tonight, a family searching for their daughter. Total disappearance.
No texts,
know anything.
Her partner, accused of murder.
His story just does not stand up to scrutiny in any way at all.
In the North American system, there's a phrase always I've heard: nobody no crime. But in our system, it's not.
Here's Crime Beat reporter Ramina Dea with Kimberly Kasakian. No body, no crime.
I don't know where she is.
Do you think you'll see her again?
Oh, no. 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 When I say she's here, it's a spiritual sense.
Al and Kathy Kasakian's daughter vanished in 2016. They have journeyed from Abbotsford, BC to Peru 16 times, searching for any sign of Kimberly. Lima was the last place she was seen alive.
Well, I just miss her so much. It's just taking so long. It's just not fair. I imagine what she must have been going through the last few minutes of her life, and I've just been having a hard time holding it together right now.
I think she's wanting something a little bit more professional. I think she just got a new job.
Kimberly Kasakian had an innate desire to help people. She took pride in giving women a new start, doing makeovers at a hair salon featured on television.
We kept telling her, you need to go on MasterChef. She liked skiing. She loved gardening. And, she loved a good joke. And she loved to laugh.
Kimberly wanted to make a difference. She was drawn to Chinese medicine as a young woman growing up in Aldergrove. Her diaries capturing her ambitions.
I'm going to go to school to be a traditional Chinese medicinal doctor. Whoa, I truly feel that this is where I'm supposed to be. Wow, I'll be able to help a lot of people. Think of all the good.
Kimberly's dream to work in Africa, providing treatment for those who can't afford it.
I'm so excited. I can't help but feel like this is so right. This is my life path.
Nervous but excited, Kimberly enters acupuncture school at Pacific Rim College on Vancouver Island in 2009. It's where she crosses paths with Christopher Franz Bataki, a Peruvian citizen.
Our passion is so intense. I'm falling hard for him. That day that Christopher walked into my classroom and sat down in front of me, my whole life changed in an instant.
What did you think of him? I thought he was a pompous ass.
That was your initial reaction?
He was too sure of himself. He was in charge.
And you could see Kim's affection for him, though, when you first
could.
Yes.
I could.
Beautiful, funny, sexy, and mature. He's 38 years old.
She was smitten by him. She certainly has let it be known that she really loved him.
After a fierce love affair, Kimberly is pregnant with the couple's son, born in Victoria.
He had money. They could travel the world helping people together. I think it was a wonderful dream, but it wasn't a reality.
Franz is expelled for plagiarism from the college where he was a student and teacher. The family packs up, embarking on a new life in Africa. Franz, who reportedly has a medical degree from Mexico, has connections with the UN. He has a contract with an NGO in Uganda.
And it was kind of a goodbye thing, and all we did was hope them well, wish them well that they were going on. And I think that's when everything really probably came to a head with that relationship because the part of Uganda they were in was north, just south of South Sudan, pretty remote, hours away from the big city. And he would go for days at a time off on his whatever he was doing. And she was just left there in a small village.
The relationship volatile. Kimberly convinced Franz is having an affair.
Christopher Franz does not depict all the men out there in the world. I just unfortunately picked an asshole and charmer who charmed me until he had me pregnant, then bam, the real him came out. Funny how everyone, and I mean everyone, told me to stay the f away from him. Stupid me had the blinders on.
Kimberly's parents in the dark about how tumultuous life had become.
We didn't know, her sisters didn't know.
Her brothers didn't know.
No, it was just something she kept within herself and her diaries.
Why she didn't just pack up the baby and leave, I don't know.
Kimberly makes a conscious choice to leave, but she's pregnant again. Determined to keep the family together, they start fresh in Lima, Peru, where their second child, a daughter, is born.
Anytime I needed any advice, I would always go to her, and she always would give her advice for health-wise. I've always been close to her.
Nobody knew Kimberly like Christina. With Kimberly now settled in Peru, the sisters are in daily contact. It's now the fall of 2016. Kimberly and Franz have been together for 7 years.
Leading up to that day, nothing had made her upset or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
No.
November 26th, the sisters exchange several messages about a trip to the farmer's market and the catch of the day.
They were going on a date. They were going out for dinner. They were going to go have sushi in some restaurant.
Surveillance footage shows the couple returning home that evening, but it's the last time 41-year-old Kimberly is seen alive.
Christopher notified us that she's missing and asking if she can. And that was the start to suspicion.
Coming up, why Kimberly's family begins to suspect Franz isn't telling them the full story. Kimberly Kasatkins living in Peru with her partner, Christopher Franz Bataki, and their 2 young children. When Kimberly disappears, her family questions his version of events. Now back to Romina Dea with No Body, No Crime.
Christina, frantic, she repeatedly messages her sister asking, "Where are you?" Days go by, still no answer.
My parents called me, and then that's when it sounds like, well, Kim's missing. Chris says that Kim's missing.
That was it. Nobody's heard from her since.
No, total disappearance.
No texts, no anything.
Kimberly's bank account untouched to this day. Immigration records show she never leaves the country.
He thought that he could send us an email, didn't have the common courtesy to call us, sent an email that Kim has abandoned the family.
That first email coming a week after Kimberly vanished.
And over the course of a day, his story kept changing.
For more than a year and a half, Kimberly's been thinking of leaving, says Franz in court documents translated from Spanish to English. One of these days, she was not going to be home once we returned from school, Franz tells the Kasatkins via email. She also told us she needed to be by herself. It was the only way she could function. She had to be one with nature. I can tell you both so many her in these past years that would surprise you. She took the passports and half of her clothes. She does not answer the phone.
Did you believe that when you first heard that? Not for a second. Not for a second. Not with all the plans that she had. And she would never abandon her children.
Court records reveal Franz calls Peruvian police, but not to report Kimberly missing. He claims she abandoned the family, resulting in no investigation. With suspicion mounting, the Kazakhans filed their own missing persons report in Canada.
She's very active on social media, and none of our family or friends of hers that we're aware of have had any contact with her since the evening of the 26th of November.
We believe strongly that Kim's friends have had contact with her, that it was recent, maybe in November. Anything that they have could be useful to our assistance in this investigation. So if there are friends of Kim out there, they should make contact with the APD. Let us know when they last spoke. Let us know when they last posted on social media. Let us know when they last talked on the telephone.
My gut reaction right away after reading it was that something bad has happened.
Franz's email to the Kazakhans, a key piece of evidence for the Abbotsford major crime detective in charge of the investigation in Canada.
I thought he was definitely withholding information or being economical with the truth.
For safety reasons, the undercover officer cannot be identified because of his current unit.
His story just does not stand up to scrutiny in any way at all. And also the timing of events. It took him 6 days to send the email to the Kazakhans to say that she had, in his words, abandoned the family. The bulk of his email was his justification of why she would have left. And also there was zero emotion in the email from him. I would think that someone whose wife, mother of his children at all, had just walked out on him would show some emotion or some disappointment.
The detective contacts Interpol requesting an investigation into Kimberly's disappearance, but nothing happens.
There was a considerable delay there. I think there was 4 messages sent from Interpol in Ottawa to Interpol Peru.
Several weeks pass before Peruvian police launch a missing persons investigation. The heightened urgency prompting the Kazakhans to fly to Lima immediately.
It's incredibly frustrating to watch this investigation unfold in another country that I can't assist with, or I'm not directly involved with it at all. I would, if I could, I would like to be, but obviously that's not possible.
Hit my face. Here's my knee. He grabbed the back of my hair. Handfuls of hair left coming out.
Kimberly's family and friends horrified when shocking allegations of abuse surface on Peruvian television.
I'm very angry. Bruises and hair loss and the petechia in her mouth.
There were so many times that she was in my apartment just in tears, just incredibly upset.
Rachel Foyce, one of Kimberly's best friends, lived below the couple.
You know, I would describe their relationship as being very toxic. They'd had a lot of fights, and he had said, well, you can leave anytime you want. The plane is there. You can go anytime you want back to Canada, but the children will stay here. She never would have left those kids. Never. And there's no way. There's no way. She stayed there for them. She put herself through all of that just to stay for her children.
A history of conflict laid out in Kimberly's own words.
I'm scared. What if Christopher really hurts me bad one day? He dislikes me so much. He's annoyed by my every move. Sometimes chewing food pisses him off. He thinks that I was going to stay here with him? Yeah, okay, over my dead body. And I mean that too.
She wanted to get out. She did try and go to the Canadian embassy for advice of what she could do. because she felt so incredibly helpless.
Looking for answers, we go to the Canadian Embassy while we're in Peru. We are told to stop filming. The head of security meets us outside.
She was concerned for her safety. She was concerned for her children's safety. And after that, she vanished, that she didn't get the help she needed from her own country's embassy. So we're trying to get somebody that can answer those questions for us.
I'm going to get that contact for you. There's somebody that will relay the information that will talk to you about this.
The Canadian Embassy in Lima refusing to answer specific questions, citing privacy. The investigation into Kimberly's disappearance crawling along until a pivotal piece of evidence surfaces.
I just kept saying, we'll see her walk out of the building. She'll be carrying her bags. Maybe that's, and we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But that part we saw. We saw the package being dragged. So that was kind of set. I think I actually jumped up and I yelled and accused him right there.
Accused him of what?
Murder. And that he was getting rid of the body.
Up next, Franz maintains his innocence, providing a different explanation for what he was doing with the large bag. Christopher Franz Vitaki maintains his partner Kimberly Kisaki abandoned him and their kids, that she took off. But new video footage challenges that version of events. We return now to Ramina Dea with No Body, No Crime.
The stunning video shows Franz dragging a large mystery bag from the elevator to his vehicle in his underground parkade. It's a colossal break-in case.
What did you think when you saw that footage?
The first thing for me was my heart sank. Even though I had already suspected that this is what had occurred.
Well, for us, it's not disappear. For us, she is being murdered.
Julio Rodriguez, Kimberly's lawyer, details chilling evidence.
That evidence, if you put it in the correct way, as the public prosecutors did, is very strong. Because you can prove she goes into the apartment. You can prove he moves a suitcase that weighs a lot of, because he can't, how do you say, he can't lift it. And the part where he put the suitcase in the basement, the police take the luminol test, and they found her blood. The blood that is directly matched to Kimberly's one.
The prosecutor's report states Kimberly's blood is found on a column in the parkade, and traces of unidentifiable blood are discovered on the apartment door, elevator button, and on the couple's mattress. Franz is arrested February 21st, 2017, in a cafe near his home. He denies Kimberly's body is in the bag, telling police it's camping gear. So where does Franz go after he leaves the parkade? Court records state he tells investigators he's with his kids on the boardwalk, but cell phone records reveal he makes a trip outside Miraflores.
That was a blunder on his part. And yes, the police immediately thought that's where the body went, is somewhere down in Chilca.
Armed with cadaver dogs, police hone in on Chilca, a city 90 minutes outside Lima. While in custody, Franz is taken to the scene. He has land in the area. 2 bodies are ultimately discovered. Based on Kimberly's dental records, it's not her. The case erupts in Peru, dominating national headlines. Christopher pasó así a ser investigado por el presunto delito de feminicidio. March 1st, 2017. Franz is charged with femicide, the killing of a woman under Peruvian law. Femicide is one of the most serious crimes in Peru. It carries a higher sentence than homicide.
In the North American system, there's a phrase always I've heard: nobody no crime. But in our system, it's not, because if we have enough evidence, we can't use that evidence to sentence him for feminicide. There's a lot of evidence.
One of the country's most respected news anchors weighs in on the case.
It's not because she was Canadian. It's because the case itself, because of the evidence, because of a woman involved as a victim. No, we have a lot of cases, and this is one more. And also the social situation of the family. It's for our audience, it's very interesting to know that it's not just with poor people that this kind of things could happen.
En Lima, en la sala de audiencia del juzgado permanente de
Franz's first appearance broadcast live on the internet. Kimberly's parents face to face with Franz in the courtroom. The Kasakians struggling to understand what's happening because they don't speak Spanish. Franz unflinching as he watches the powerful evidence against him. He denies Kimberly's body is in the bag. Defense making the case its camping gear.
It is concluded as observed that the package seen in a black bag should weigh more than 40 kilos. Considering the movements and positions of the male carrying it. It could be 42, 45, 50, but not 90 or 80 as referred on the other expert's report. Mrs. Kimberly, we know she was no less than 1.77 to 1.78 meters tall. And she was, we think, between 75 or 80 kilos in weight, based on her height.
An absurd interpretation of the evidence, argues Kimberly's lawyer. Here's why. While in custody, police get Franz to reenact the dragging of the bag caught on surveillance tape. Physical tests conclude a high probability of a body inside, weighing approximately 80 kilograms.
A tent weighs between 18 to 21 kilos with or without screen. The lessons of experience tell us he wasn't carrying a tent, Your Honor. Of course the defense is trying to confuse you, Your Honor. Saying the expert's report has insufficient proof.
They say that the package is a tent and it's not that heavy. But it wasn't just one tent, but two of them, and a sunshade. On top of that, there were King Kong-sized bricks tied to the tent.
The court battle continues over multiple blood stains found at the crime scene.
There's no match with the apartment's door stand. There's no match with the fifth floor hallways. There's no match with the elevator buttons. There's no match with any of the basement number 2 surroundings. And parking stall number 29, Your Ladyship.
That's just trying to confuse the magistrate. It is solid evidence. The blood on the column is scientifically and genetically proven to be Mrs. Kimberly's.
Defense arguing Kimberly abandoned the family. Impossible, says her lawyer.
Why spousal abandonment? Because she vanished, carrying some of her belongings, passport, visa, cell phone.
As observed on the surveillance footage from November 26th, proves without any doubt
that Mrs. Kimberly Kasakian entered the apartment approximately between 8 or 9 p.m. And the analyzed footage also proves she never left the building. Both entered the apartment building on the 26th, only one came out. And with that sole indication, we should have enough to begin a criminal proceeding.
We ask ourselves if Mrs. Kimberly was a victim of domestic violence or any physical or mental abuse, even more being a foreigner. Wouldn't she have reached out to police to file a record or a complaint about it against my client? There's no complaint about that, Your Ladyship. Here's the record from the Family Prosecution Office.
Kimberly Kasakian didn't speak Spanish. If she didn't file a complaint, it is because she wasn't able to do it. Was there economic dependence? Without any doubt. Was there social dependence? Yes, without a doubt. Your Honor, what we have here is beyond the scope to begin a femicide criminal proceeding in offense of Mrs. Kimberly Kasakian.
A dramatic moment unfolds next. The judge asks Franz if he has anything to say.
Good afternoon. First of all, they want to link me to an act that I have not committed. They want to imprison me, and at this moment, what are my children going to do? We have to be together. I feel and I know that Kimberly is alive somewhere, and while all three of us are together waiting for her, imagine they want to separate us. That can't happen. That doesn't seem fair. What happens if she comes back soon and I'm in prison? Who will the kids stay with? My mother works. My aunt works. With who will they be, other than with their dad waiting for their mom? And from what I've heard, these are indirect accusations, and it's all very confusing. And it is a very difficult time, and I find it unfair what they want to impute on me. Thank you.
I resolve, declare founded the requirement of preventive detention.
In the end, the judge rules to detain Franz, pending a trial on one count of femicide, the accused considered a flight risk.
We really thought in 3-4 months there's going to be a trial.
But a shocking phone call from Peruvian press flipped the case.
Coming up, the stunt turn of events that changes everything. Christopher Franz Bataki is in custody, charged with murdering his partner Kimberly. Her family could never have predicted what happens next. Now back to Romina Dea with No Body, No Crime.
The Kasakians astonished when Peruvian press break the news Franz is a free man.
I was blindsided. We were living in Chilliwack at the time, and we got a phone call
From the press, despite the scale of evidence resulting in 2 judges denying Franz's release, a third judge in another jurisdiction lets him go on habeas corpus in June 2018, citing insufficient grounds for detention.
It's amazing to understand what was in the mind of the judge deciding to release someone that is very, very, risk for the procedure.
He is planned, strategic, self-centered, deceptive, and cunning. This is how Franz is described in the police forensic psychology report. It goes on to state the accused is a cynic and manipulator, highly distrustful, sensitive, and confrontational in the presence of what he perceives as a threat. Franz's reaction to Kimberly's disappearance, he seems cold and unaffected, the experts conclude.
And in the second instance, the court said that the judge's decision was charitable and orders him to return back to prison.
But Franz is gone, his whereabouts unknown. He is facing one of the most serious charges in Peru. Femicide, the killing of a woman, carries a higher sentence than homicide. Kimberly, now a face in the fight for gender justice.
Every woman has a story, so we don't have any Jane Does here. Y ni no menos anyone, nobody is anonymous.
Women's rights activists with ni una menos, meaning not one less, demanding a fair trial for Kimberly. A woman is killed every 3 days on average in Peru. Kimberly, one of thousands activists march for. Femicide is a unique charge in the Peruvian criminal code, very different than Canada, where murder is murder. It's gender neutral.
Una sociedad no puede denominarse democrática.
A society can be democratic if we don't respect women, and our justice system has to answer this standard.
Supreme Court Justice Elvia Barrios Alvarado is unable to weigh in on Franz's case because it's before the court. The judge, who is also president of the Gender Justice Commission, says in general, women are being killed because of sexist beliefs.
La muerte de la mujer en manos de un hombre por su condición de mujer tiene un reproche penal mayor.
Of course, because woman's death against a man has sentence, a higher sentence. And this is a message for all the men that mistreat women in a line of prevention that any act will be penalized.
Violence against women, an epidemic in Latin America, where femicide is now a crime in more than a dozen countries. An evolution of the law, but impunity prevails, say activists.
We cannot say that it is working. Maybe it is more visible, and now the society is more alert on any case of violence against women. In the past, it was not like that. Now, this is a really intention as a society interest, to stop the violence against women. But in the past, there were other governments, and some corruption remained inside the judicial system, between the judges, between the police, and that is the problem, because it is a very masculine world also.
In Kimberly's case, the public prosecutor is seeking a 17-year sentence for Franz, who's charged with 1 count of femicide. There is a new warrant out for Franz's arrest. We tried to ask Franz's mother if she knows where her son might be. Mrs. Pataki, not talking.
Me llamo Lumina Daya. Soy reportera de Canada. I have a letter from your son saying he's innocent. I just want to hear your side.
Franz says he's in Peru, but where? In an email, the fugitive tells us he has not vanished, but he's refusing to answer any questions.
I am in Peru, just waiting for the trial to start. Once the trial is over and I can finally prove my innocence, when that moment comes, I will start legal actions against those who have defamed me and against those who have given false statements about my name and integrity.
Coming up, the case in limbo. The Kazakhans fight for custody of their grandchildren. Welcome back to Crime Beat. It's been more than 3 years since the Kasatkins last had contact with their daughter. Her accused killer, Christopher Franz Bataki, remains a fugitive. He maintains his innocence. He returned to Romina Dea with a conclusion of no body, no crime.
Franz is one of Peru's top 10 most wanted. The price on his head, 20,000 soles, for any information leading to his capture. It works out to about 8,000 Canadian dollars, more than a year's salary for the average Peruvian. A criminal trial, impossible until Franz is found.
Peru doesn't have a justice system. It has a legal system, but there is no justice system there.
Why isn't there any movement in this case? And certainly we've been told that the only time something happens is if we come to Peru. While we're gone, everything just stagnates. So it was kind of important to go on a regular basis and prod people and ask questions and trigger this and see where things are going.
And a criminal trial? Have you given up on that?
I think the way I look at Christopher, I hope he has to hide until he's 90 years old from the law and just live with that idea that he's always a fugitive.
The Kasatkins have gone to extremes in their hunt for Kimberly, even risking their lives, cutting deals with extortionists who claim they know where she's buried.
$50,000, they revealed the body, the location. I think we got them down to $5,000, and he would put a $2,000 deposit, pending a small piece of evidence.
So you're negotiating with extortionists?
Yes.
Well, that's what it's come down to.
That's what it came down to, yes. Oh, well, we're kind of desperate.
But we didn't want to, 10 years later, say, maybe we should have, and maybe it really was him.
I would love to have the body found. That would make it really reopen everything, but yes, it would be nice to have her come home and properly hear it, as opposed to some strange valley in Peru where nobody knows, and some archaeologists may find the bone somewhere.
Powerless to assist, Canadian investigators watch from afar, waiting for Peruvian police to arrest Franz.
What I hope is that hopefully the Kasatkins, they get their day in court and the evidence is presented in front of the judge fairly, and the outcome is what it is after that. But I think the Kasatkins at least deserve that, because I know they've tried so hard to move this forward, and they've had many roadblocks along the way. I would just like to see them get some form of closure to this.
No body, no death certificate, but it's time to put Kimberly to rest. The family moving forward with a service in September 2019.
We all miss her. Sorry she's gone, but let's celebrate her life as it was. At the age of 41 is never a good time to have a life end. There could have been so much more. She never knew her when her aunt Beverly Moser passed away. She never knew when her grandmother Maxine Moser passed away. They all outlived her. And sadly, she never knew that she was about to become a grandmother. She never looked upon her grandson Kessler, who's here today.
Why do we need to have her body? Like, it's the spirit, and you're celebrating their life. But like, just because you don't have the body doesn't mean that they still don't deserve to have a celebration of their life.
It was like a huge weight, and it lifted a large portion of the weight. Having a celebration of life for Kim
Some people agreed with it, some didn't, because there's no body. But I know Kim is not with us anymore. We know. And I feel so much better having gotten through that and celebrated her life. Now we're not worrying about any of the rest of it. Like what is the next step we take concerning Kim? It's been taken.
It wasn't an easy decision, but hope is fading. The focus now, Kimberly's legacy. Her children, who are living with the accused killer's mother in Lima. The Kazakins' only contact with their grandchildren in court.
They have been told, pretend you don't know them, don't look at them, don't approach them, don't talk to them.
He's always said, I want to stay with my sister, and I want to stay with my grandmother, and I want to stay with my two dogs, and some friends I have. And he's always said, I don't want to go to Canada. It's too cold. Snow all the time. So he doesn't want to live there.
How do you feel hearing that?
I just feel a bit remorse. That's all it is. It's not him. It's someone else putting the words in his mouth.
Kimberly's parents fully aware the court battle could take years. They sold their house and are exhausting retirement savings to finance their fight for custody.
I'd love to just sit back someday and just like over a campfire or a barbecue and just tell stories. I mean, I think that's what grandparents are supposed to do, right?
The children have an army of family in Canada, including a half-brother and sister, Noah and Bridget, from Kimberly's first marriage. Everyone eager to establish a bond.
Do you think you're ever going to see them again?
No.
You don't?
No. With him being out there, we'll never see the kids.
It's a shame that children are now just growing up saying, Mom left, and that's it. She didn't care about us. And
that makes me really angry.
That's the lie they're living with right now. There's going to be a point where the children will be on the internet, they will Google a name, and suddenly all of this information comes flooding at them. But we hope that someday these children actually go online, find out what the real story is behind their missing mother and their missing father, and make their own decisions to say, I've had it with this family. I want to go see my brothers and sisters in Canada. I want to see my grandparents in Canada.
It's a waiting game. The Kazakins' gut instinct. The children will come to know how much they were loved by their mom. Kimberly's diaries, waiting to tell them.
We reached out to Christopher Franz Pataki for the show multiple times, but we have not heard back. The femicide charge against him remains unproven in a court of law. And until there is a trial, it's unlikely Kimberly's family will ever learn the truth about what happened to her. They remain stuck between two justice systems, one in Canada, without the authority or jurisdiction to pursue their daughter's alleged killer, another in Peru, complex, foreign, and far away. Please contact your local law enforcement.